Marriage has become unsafe ground for men.
Marriage?
Marriage.
Why is marriage unsafe for men?
Are men trash?
Cis, heterosexual men, absolutely, especially white men.
There's pro-women people that don't give a fuck about women. They're bullshit artists.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
they're supposed feminists when they're just narcissists.
I've heard all my life are bitchy and pushy and so on and so forth. I meet them and they're nice, compassionate people.
You should aim to be successful, but not too successful. Otherwise, you will threaten the man.
I asked a woman out when I was a kid. I learned that I couldn't feel comfortable asking her out unless I had more money than she did.
I started Bumble. I really wanted to reverse engineer from the very first hello, and that's why women make the first move.
Tomorrow is the day of retribution.
Is this the latest face of evil in America?
Free the nipple!
You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
Hashtag not all men was born with the hashtag yes all women.
I think men have lost their rights in certain issues, domestic violence, sexual issues. You are guilty.
Called the Violence Against Women Act.
I think the time has come when women have got to find self-respect and a full identity of their own.
Breaking news here this morning. Same-sex marriage legal in this country across every state in this nation.
Everything I see has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No. We want to end gender inequality. We want to try and galvanize as many men and boys as possible.
Many years ago, I began to use the term intersectionality.
The gender wars are trending with articles like these, but people have been talking about the gender wars on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok for a while now. Half of the discussion about the gender wars is political, and the other half of the conversation is about dating and relationships. But anything related to personal identity and dating becomes political because, as second wave feminists said, the personal is political. This timeline of the gender wars is intersectional because it has to be to have a complete conversation about it. We're starting at the birth of feminism and the men's liberation movement and bringing it all the way to present day.
Bitch, what I was trying to say is this situation got me so wet and so dry at the same time. Exactly.
What's up, bitches? Welcome back to another episode of So Wet, So Dry. I am one of your hosts, Autumn, like the season. I have undiagnosed carpal tunnel and I literally can't feel my hands, and I work in entertainment. And I'm your other host, Fiji, like the island, like the water. I am really into boxed wine right now, and I work in social media and marketing. If you guys are new here, what we do is we explore duality through deep diving topics about sex, relationships, and personal identity, all where internet trends and reality collide. We do post polls on our Instagram for every single episode so you guys can participate in the questions and also submit your own stories. So make sure you're following us on Instagram at So Wet So Dry. The O's are zeros to be a part of that. And whatever you're doing right now, whatever platform you're listening on, please take a second to subscribe or follow. You can like the video and definitely leave a comment below, especially on a video like this. We need to keep the conversation going, and we want to hear other people's ideas, experiences, and things like that. So please comment below. You can also rate us on Apple or Amazon. You can give us a 5-star rating, and you can give written reviews on Apple as well. That'll really help us. Let us know if you do that. Yes, like Autumn said, definitely please, please, please comment. This is a pretty comprehensive timeline, starting with the first wave of feminism and bringing us up to present day, but we did not include absolutely everything. That is impossible. We are not actually historians. So if we did miss something that you guys think is super, super important culturally, please comment below and join the conversation. And we also just want to say this is a really important episode to us because it was about a year ago today, this week, that we did our first Gender Wars episode that kind of popped off. It kind of pissed off the manosphere and a lot of incels. Yeah, it did. And then we continue to do a lot of episodes more focused on gender, how it plays out in relationships, on TikTok, online, all of that stuff. So these are all those episodes. We also have a gender and sexuality playlist on our YouTube channel. So if you guys are looking for us to break down these topics more in depth, definitely check that out. And like I said earlier, we also will have a part 2 to this episode coming out the following week.
So definitely check that out too.
And honestly, we've learned so much from not only doing these episodes, but researching them individually. And we've come a long way. Like, I kind of want to watch our Gender Wars episode from a year ago
it's
because
not the same.
I guarantee you it is so much different now. Like, our feminism has become a lot more intersectional, like with all different types of socio identities in this world, like everything that we've tried to incorporate. So it's been a journey, and even thinking about a year from now, I'm sure we're going to evolve. It is an ever evolving journey, and
So the gender wars of today, politically in between sex and relationship, are huge and very much talked about, but they have been a thing since honestly the beginning of time. But we are starting us at the beginning of the first wave of feminism. And we are going to draw parallel lines between feminism and the feminist movement, and then also the men's rights and men's activist movement going up to the manosphere of today. We're going to start with the first wave of feminism. We're not going to talk about the first wave that much, but it started in 1848. It went until 1920. And this was all about, women's suffrage. It was very white women. So then we move into the 1960s and 1980s with the second wave of feminism. During this time, we have race, class, capitalism, gender, sexuality a little bit kind of merging into one super big like civil social movement. They all kind of were on their own little corners.
Right. Nothing was connected at all. It was like everyone was fighting for just themselves and their identity.
Even though there was crossover between the issues, we did not get to intersectionality yet.
At this point, yeah.
Right. But some of the wins during this period were Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prevented employers from discriminating against employees on the basis of race, religion, sex, or national origin. We also had Griswold versus Connecticut Supreme Court ruling of 1965, which prevented anyone from limiting a woman's access to contraception or other methods of birth control. And as we know, guys, contraceptive birth control rights are a little bit up on the chopping block right now, but it is important to note that it was, instituted in the 1960s. Then we also get the famous case of Roe v. Wade, which has since been overturned, that we will talk about later. And this was in 1973 that gave women the right to abortion. And then we also had President John F. Kennedy sign the Equal Pay Act of 1963 into law. This time, feminism was predominantly seen as just white feminism. And we have Betty Friedan, which most people know. She wrote The Feminine Mystique. And this was inspired by a lot of feminist writings in the first wave of feminism, but it focused mostly on the malaise of being like a housewife. Like it was very like white, middle, upper class, like focused. There were capitalist intersections, but not too much.
Right. Got to start somewhere, I guess.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah. But at the same time that this is going on, we also have the civil rights movement and non-white feminists coming together. So we obviously have Martin Luther King, we have Malcolm X and the Black Panther Party. There were so many women in the civil rights movement that were super key to pushing this movement forward, but they did branch out and have their own kind of non-white Black feminist space as well, because men were still sexist in that movement. And then white women weren't accepting them either. So this is where we get Frances M. Beale published Double Jeopardy to be Black and female. So kind of like the early grounds for intersectionality. And then we also have the National Black Feminist Organization was formed in 1973, the NBFO. And then we also have the Combahee River Collective, which honestly, I remember learning about this in college and one of our like Black Revolutionary Studies classes. It might have been the one before you were in that
I
class.
wasn't in,
yeah, but this is Audre Lorde was a part of it, and it was in Boston. Like it was in Roxbury, Boston, Dorchester, like where I used to live, like where we were all the time. And they wrote poetry, they wrote like Black feminist revolutionary thought. There were like queer intersections as well. Like all of their writings were honestly incredible. And then during this time, we also have the gay rights movement as well. Beginning in the 1960s, we had the Stonewall riots of 1969. Lesbian women were often excluded from male-dominated gay rights movement, so they had their own lesbian movement. And then lesbian feminists like Audre Lorde were also parts of like the civil rights movement, Black feminists. So there were intersections between the movements, but they were still kind of separate.
Yeah.
And then there were radical lesbians as well that separated themselves from like the white feminists because they didn't agree with like the heterosexual housewife situation. They were like, that has nothing to do with me. They had their own separatist camp, And also it's important to note that among feminists, before we move into the third wave, one of the reasons that the second wave started to kind of like peel off is because there were arguments about pornography and sex and sexuality. So like sex positive feminism, that wasn't really a thing. So then we get all of these people going in two different directions as well. But still,
it always comes back to pornography, bro.
Yes,
why?
Like always sex, like because you have the like conservative feminists that are like just focused on the housewife role, and then you have like more like queer, like the sex plays in more. So in the 1970s, still during the second wave of feminism, we have the men's liberation movement, and the men's liberation movement was part of the feminist movement. So they were men that were feminists that were like, we believe in women's rights, we believe in women's rights to work, we believe in the liberated woman, all of these things. And there were some discussions over whether these men were actually feminists or if they just wanted their wives to like leave them alone and they wanted a second income. So like from the beginning, there were kind of like side eyes from feminists to be like, what are you really like joining this movement for? But there was also the men's liberation movement, which was part of the feminist movement, which focused on how men were also oppressed by patriarchy and gender. So for the men that weren't just performative in their activism, trying to get their wife to have a second job and like leave them alone and stuff, there were men that were actually genuinely concerned about the patriarchy and its effect on men and their like presentation of gender and like what that all meant for them. So they believe that men may have more institutional power, but they are still imprisoned by their aggression or emotional constipation, or both. One man from the men's liberation movement said, the women's movement raised questions for me about the phony parts of masculinity that I had bought and that had always existed. It's also important to note that this men's liberation movement was a little bit intersectional as well, because this one psychologist named Jack Sawyer published an article on male liberation and Liberation, which was a New Left magazine, best known for publishing Martin Luther King Jr.'s Birmingham letter from jail. And he said in this article that male liberation calls for men to free themselves of the sex role stereotypes that limit their ability to be human. So one of the biggest components of this men's liberation movement in conjunction with the feminist movement was men's groups. They had a lot of like kind of like group therapy sessions where they talked about the pressures of masculinity, whether it be like, you know, because the Vietnam War had just gone on and all of that. Men were working really hard labor jobs. They felt like they couldn't express their emotions. They felt like in this prison of masculinity. But at the same time, it was pretty racially exclusive. It was just like white, blue collar to like middle class men. And it's also important to note that the exclusion of these other racial groups is pointed at as part of the downfall to the men's liberation movement of this time.
Right.
But one man from one of those groups was quoted to have said, so many guys have it in the back of their minds that they have to be a jock, some kind of super male just to exist. And he had gotten into the men's liberation movement after being laid off, and it gave him intense feelings of inadequacy. He said, our enemy isn't women, it's the role we're forced to play. Give women economic equality and there will be more freedom for human beings to get what they want from each other. And this is kind of like one of those quotes where it's like women were like for it, but they were also like, what are your intentions? Like, you know, but women on the feminist movement were still skeptical to be like, oh, like men are completely oppressed by their gender. They were kind of like, we want men to not be toxic, like not to embody toxic masculinity because it hurts us, not really about liberating men from. Exactly. So that's kind of where it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then we have this prominent spokesperson, Warren Farrell. And he wrote a book called The Liberated Man with many others that talked about men's liberation in the media. And he even co-founded a men's consciousness raising chapter of the prominent feminist organization, the National Organization of Women, now, also known as NOW. And he was even BFFs with Gloria Steinem. So I'm going to put a picture on the screen of them together. And even Toni Morrison had actually written acknowledgments in his book, The Liberated Man. So they were like very supportive of what he was doing. And he also went on a lot of speaking engagements for the feminist movement on like colleges, throughout rallies, like all of that stuff. But it is also important to note that there's a little bit of a discrepancy as far as the feminists go and the men's libers as to like what was really going on, because in like more present day times, an interviewer asked Gloria Steinem about this time period. And she said that she didn't remember it being a men's liberation movement. She just remembered them being like male feminists. So you can kind of see how in her minds, like the men's existence in the movement was all about fighting for the gender equality of women. And it wasn't about like fighting for like the breakdown of gender roles for men.
Right.
Because she just believed them to be like feminists. It's not really like that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And then some other criticisms of the men's liberation movement at the time was Carol Hansich, who is behind the phrase "the personal is political," which I mentioned in the beginning, which also was kind of the groundwork for intersectionality as well. She was quoted to have saying that like, you know, a lot of these men think that they're oppressed by gender, but they're really just oppressed by capitalism, because one of the biggest things that they would say is that we're seen as success objects, where women are seen as just like housewives, like retired to the home. Men are seen as just their ability to like protect, provide, like make money. And she argues that that's like a capitalism thing, not necessarily like a gender thing. But I do think it's kind of both.
Kind of both. I agree.
Yeah.
Like maybe it wouldn't exist as a men's issue if there wasn't capitalism, but like there is capitalism and it does affect them in a different way.
Right. And it's intersectional, right? Because like capitalism nowadays does it more to everyone because women are working. But at the time, because of patriarchy and gender oppression, only men were working.
Right.
So it's like, you know, it's
you have to contextualize it. Yeah.
Yeah. So another criticism is that even among white men, they didn't include all white men. Like they didn't include like very lower class, like poverty stricken men. And they also didn't try to bring like rapists or like wife beaters like into the conversation, which I know is like a weird thing to think about, but like women were thinking like, oh, you need to be holding these men accountable, versus these men were kind of just like, oh, we're supportive of you and we're fighting for our rights, but like that's where we draw the line. They weren't necessarily going into communities of other men trying to like make change with other men kind of thing.
Okay.
Yep. So that was definitely a big criticism. And then also articles written by male authors about the men's liberation movement in mainstream publications had strains of contempt. Like one Life piece, the author called these groups embarrassing vanguard and used paternity leave as an example of the world becoming too sensitive. So this is kind of where you see like these men were still very liberal for the time, but the predominant like male gendered culture was like, oh, you're just being a wimp, like you're just being a pussy, you just want to be like feminized, which is a conversation that we get into a lot today and stuff like that. So like that's how you kind of see like they were a little bit oppressed by gender and patriarchy as well, because there were other men that were like, you're just being a wimp kind of thing. So it wasn't just the capitalism, you know?
Yeah. Right. Because it's like the women don't get that added layer of like being made fun of to like stand up for themselves and like for their rights.
Well, they did. I mean, women were called angry feminists, like childless, catless. They were definitely being called that as well. But yeah.
They both were, I guess.
Yeah, they both were. They were both like, you know, because they were going against what stereotypical gender roles were. And then they also had a problem with really growing the men's liberation movement because men were really, really resistant to joining these men's groups. Warren Farrell even said the essence of what it means to be a successful man is to repress your feelings, not express your feelings. So that's why they had a really hard time recruiting men into these groups, because they were like, I don't talk about my feelings. Like, that's not a thing. That's not what I do, which is exactly why they were
needed to be there.
Yeah, they needed to be there. Exactly.
Because that's a huge problem.
So, yeah. So still in the second wave of feminism, but in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan became president, who was very, very conservative. And then we kind of see this reemergence of like the celebration of masculinity. We get movies like Rambo, The Terminators, with characters like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger celebrated for being hypermasculine. And they were very physically imposing, emotionless, and violent. These portrayals reinforced the ideals of male toughness, self-reliance, and aggression. And the dominance of these action heroes contributed to the ongoing cultivation of toxic masculinity in the media. Also during this time, we get kind of a renaissance of Black feminism. So this is where we get Angela Davis, who published works like Women, Race, and Class, laying the foundation for the Black feminist movement. And then we get Bell Hooks. We fucking love Bell Hooks, guys. She published A.I. a Woman, Black Women and Feminism. We get The Bridge Called My Back, which is also like a compilation of a bunch of Black feminist writers. which was amazing. I studied that in school too. Love it so much. And then we got Alex Walker introduced the concept of womanism in Search for Our Mothers, Gardens, and Womanist Prose, highlighting a form of Black feminism focused on community survival. And then lastly, we get our girl, Kimberly Crenshaw, who we loved. She came up with the term intersectionality to show how people's various identities, race, class, gender overlap to influence how they are treated in society.
Yeah, all of the people that you just named are literally so influential, like every single one of them and so much more. But it's important to say that if we had listened to these people, maybe things wouldn't have been this way. And it's also like relevant today as well. It's like we still haven't listened because look who was just elected president. White people still aren't talking to one another and like doing the work in their own communities. Like this is still like, we're still not listening.
Yeah.
I guess we've listened a little more, but like, yeah.
But not quite. And exactly like even in last week's episode where we talked about pleasure activism and like Audre Lorde had the uses of the erotica, like the essay about sex work and all of that stuff, like a lot of that thought, like leadership during this time period is stuff that we have still not figured out today. And like, if we point back to it, it like puts a lot of things in perspective. But we, again, silenced queer voices, Black voices, ones that would have been crucial to moving the movement forward to not just being about like white women and then kind of like isolating white men and letting them get worse. And white women still got worse as well because it wasn't like every white woman was a feminist.
So building off of the second wave of feminism, we get third wave feminism between roughly the 90s and the 2010s. And this is where intersectionality did come more into play. Credits to Kimberly Crenshaw, obviously, like we just mentioned. So now race, class, and gender were being discussed in political feminist movements more than they ever had been before. So one of the most influential things, arguably, to have happened during this time was the Anita Hill hearings. And if you guys don't know, the Anita Hill hearings was when she accused Clarence Thomas, who was at the time a Supreme Court nominee, of sexual harassment. And Thomas essentially ruled it off by being racism because he is a Black man, which completely eliminated Anita, who is standing right before him, as a Black woman. So this is kind of like the pre-Me Too era, honestly. And it's like now more than ever before, women started to speak up about sexual harassment and things like that and recognize that, ooh, maybe we shouldn't be nominating so many men to be in Congress right now.
Yeah, and this is really tricky as well because it was a very pivotal and important time for this feminist wave because a lot of white feminists got behind Anita Hill and were very supportive of her.
Right.
And so feminism became like more intersectional with like these white women getting behind her. But it's weird, right? Because Clarence Thomas, even though arguably like he is a bad man, was still a Black man. So for white women to go after a Black man was easier for them to do than go after a white man. And same for the rest of white men as well. So it was like this weird moment, like this super important case, but you get like all of these different like identities like converging.
Right.
Where like white feminists are like more supportive of Black feminists, but then still like maybe motivated by racism. So it's like weird.
Because it's like white feminists weren't backing Anita Hill because of her identity as a Black person and a woman. It was just the woman stuff, and just because it so happened to fit into white feminism with the sexual harassment of a man, you know, so it wasn't correct in the way that they did it, but could be seen as a slight win because, like you said, it did change everything, and the intersectionality was intersectionalizing more than ever was before.
Yeah, and Anita Hill received a lot of criticism as well because a lot of people on the Black like liberation civil rights movement side were heavily accusing her like this is a Black man about to be like elected as a Supreme Court justice and you are preventing him from doing that. So she was like, it doesn't matter. Yes, I'm still Black, but I'm also still a woman.
Right.
And this isn't right regardless. So it was like a very pivotal moment. So during this time in the 80s as well, we get the Riot Girl movement, which was essentially another renaissance, but it was mostly white women in punk music that started all of these feminist bands. One of the biggest ones was Bikini Kill with Kathleen Hanna as the front runner. And I loved Riot Girl's music. They had these like zines, like these cute little like magazines that were all about like liberation. They were very, very forward thinking, and like my dad was really into like punk music, and like they grew up in the 80s. So like I was listening to this music like when I was really young, and that was kind of my first idea of feminism, was very like fuck the man, fuck the system, like rah rah kind of shit, because like men were doing that, but this is the first time that women were. And then during this time you also get the Guerrilla Girls, who did this famous billboard that had like a naked woman with the gorilla mask on, and it said, "Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum?" So feminism starts hitting like mainstream culture, mainstream media, with all of these kind of like protest publicity stunts, like arts, cultural events. But because the Riot Girl movement and Riot Girl music became so popular, other women's music artists and like pop artists and even girl groups like the Spice Girls started to kind of bandwagon on this idea of girl power, and then it started to become more commercialized. So then we start to see the very first like commercialization of feminism, and kind of like painting it as like, yeah, like girl power, woohoo, and not necessarily like rooting it in the feminist text and the actual like rights that women were like fighting for.
In the 90s was one of the first times as well where the sex worker movement sort of began, and people were fighting for sex workers to do sex work without harassment or ridicule in any other areas of their life, or criminalization, which I feel like is huge. Like you don't even think about that today, but back then it was like obviously extremely different. So that was kind of the first time that was happening. And we also got the vagina monologues during this time, which is an episodic play written in 96 by Eve Ensler. And basically the play explores consensual and non-consensual experiences, body image, genital mutilation, direct and indirect encounters with reproduction, vaginal care, menstrual periods, prostitution, and several other topics through the eyes of women with various ages and races. And I feel like this is kind of like the female gaze, right? Like this is like early female gaze, like vagina monologues. Like, I don't know. Like I can only imagine like how people felt about it during this time. Even now, some people can't say vagina with their full chest. So I feel like that being in the title was even huge. And then obviously the list that I just listed of what it was exploring, like again, huge for this time, like very monumental.
Yeah, like both the vagina monologues and the sex worker movement were very counter to what had come before. And a lot of feminists kind of like looked down on this form of like sex positive feminism and like reclaiming your like body parts and your genitals and like being loud and proud about your sexuality, which it was very correlated to like the punk movement. But they were like, that's not like, oh, you're feeding into the patriarchal gaze. Like you're feeding into it. But
and
they were like, no, we're owning
that.
Yeah, and people still say that exactly. But they're like, no, we're still owning our sexuality. And the vagina monologues by Eve Ensler, that had a resurgence kind of in, I want to say it was like 2016-ish, because that's when we get like the pink pussy hats and the Me Too movement. I remember my mom had actually like bought me a copy of like the book, and I like read it.
Really?
Yeah, but when we move later into that era of feminism where it was like, you know, pussies were everywhere, like the Instagram graphics, like the pussy hats, like all like women's like naked like breasts and stuff like that. All of that was kind of like pointing to this era of feminism that was like the vagina monologues.
Because before it was like that you didn't see that. Like you didn't see a vagina or like a naked breast in that way.
No.
And it's like, but it's still like, not that it's like that necessarily anymore, but it's still like the word vagina and like reclaiming that. Like I understand why feminists like did want to take that back because it's so big. But even, like with the pink pussy hats, like it's still not including like other women, like Black women, Indigenous women, like things like that. So I don't know. And it makes sense too, because like you said, like a lot of white feminists at the time were like housewives, blue collar families. So of course they're not going to want to fight for sex workers. Like it just didn't, they weren't ready for all that yet.
Yeah. They just wanted to be in the workforce. That was their whole thing. That was like it. They were like, I don't want to be a housewife. I want to be in the workforce. I want to be respected like a man. Like their whole idea of being liberated was to be equal to men and seen as men. It wasn't like, it wasn't like, oh, we want to be like respected for all of our femininity and everything else too. It was just like, oh, we want the same rights and the same responsibilities that men have. So
yeah.
In 1993, we also get the very, very groundwork for what will become the manosphere. And we have Warren Farrell, which if you guys remember, he was very much a part of the feminist movement. He was part of the men's liberation movement. He starts to be like, feminists weren't really doing it for me. He thinks that he was there. He was spouting all the things that they wanted him to say, but they weren't paying attention to his issues as a man. So he goes off and he writes this book called The Myth of Male Power. And this is widely considered today to be the men's rights activist Bible, which we're going to get into later, the development of this group of people that leads into the red pill and the incels and all of those people.
Right.
But in the intro, he reflects on his years as a men's liberation spokesman and admits that he slowly became good at saying what women wanted to hear. But as years went on, he observed an increasing anger towards men, a restlessness in feminist eyes. He'd been listening to women, but not to men. It was time to hear what his fellow dudes had to say. He didn't say dudes. That's just what this article says. And in the myth of male power, all right, we have some seeds of decent ideas, but it takes a dark turn. He argues that men are oppressed by glass cellars, such as the war machine, dangerous professions, and suicide, and that they actually have it worse than women. And like that part is where we're like, ooh, did we good? Like, you know what I'm saying?
He went into full speed when he needed to slow the fuck down.
He goes off the cliff because it's like, yes, I even like the phrase glass cellars because, women have glass ceilings that prevent them from moving up.
Right.
But men are kind of in this like dungeon a little bit of society. And it's weird to even say cellar to a point too, because they are still at the top of the hierarchy of like power, but they are seen as very much like disposable. Like he believes that they're seen as disposable, that the military just sends them away to like die. It doesn't give them mental health care. They can't talk about their feelings. They go work really difficult jobs. They're just seen as success objects. They are imprisoned by their masculinity. But he blames this on women. Weird. So he asserts that and this is like men's rights activists of today, they very much hold on to this belief that many rape accusations are false. Okay. And that if measured in spending rather than earning, women have more economic power. So he says that drives the economy because women like spend more than men. So like they actually have more influence on like what is like popular culture. And this is with the rape accusations thing. Okay. Like again, we have taken a dark turn and he is very turned off by rape culture because that was also like a really big thing during the second wave feminist movement and into the third, because we're talking about Anita Hill and like all of that stuff. There was a big talk about rape culture and like toxic masculinity and everything like that. But like part of the men's libers and him are onto something where they talk about the fact that like there aren't enough resources for men who are victims of sexual violence and who are victims of domestic violence, because that is a thing. Like we can agree that men have experienced domestic and sexual violence as well at lower numbers, even though the numbers even today aren't that much lower. Like I think it's like 1 in 4 women for domestic violence and like 1 in 6 or something like that with men.
8,
and like
I think between
1
6 and 8.
Yeah, it's somewhere like there, but it's still like pretty high. Like men do experience it. And like I've known men that have experienced sexual and domestic violence. Like it's not a secret, but what they argue is that society only pays attention to women because there aren't shelters for men and like all of this stuff. So it's like,
and I would argue too that like maybe the numbers could be lower because like men don't speak up about it. Like I feel like like a lot of women don't speak up about it too. But I think like if we're talking about like the way that men are oppressed by their gender and like imprisoned by masculinity, it's like that could be a reason why the numbers are lower. And I am not like, I'm just saying like that could be.
And that's what women were saying too. They were like, okay, well, if that's the case, then like go start these men's shelters, you know, because they were trying to like get it into the feminist movement and be like, let's do this too. But like women were kind of like, okay, they weren't really seeing it as an issue. But I think had men organized to create those shelters and do kind of like that type of work, it would have been more successful. But they were too easily, in my opinion, kind of like, oh, you guys don't care about us. We're just going over here. Women really have the power.
Like, why did they? I guess it's like people just want to place the blame on someone because, like you said, it's like there are good ideologies here. And it's like he's not wrong in a lot of ways. But like then to just be like, oh, and also like we're oppressed more than women, too. Like it just sucks. And like, I feel like it's kind of the same thing with white feminism. It's like they have a lot of right things, but it's like they're also completely missing the point that like kind of crosses them out and like demonizes them more. And like, we all know how much men's rights activists are demonized. So it's like, and like we can learn from like Audre Lorde and like Bell Hooks and like about this kind of thing. Like they don't miss the whole point. Like they say everything. And that it's honestly unfortunate. Like really why was he close? Like
he was so close. And the other thing too that he talks about that lays the groundwork for men's rights activists, especially more in the 2000s, which we'll get to, is the whole like idea of fatherhood and paternity and divorce courts, which is that, you know, like and it's so like it's so crazy because these movements are so close and so intertwined, but they like divulge in these like completely different directions because like the women are like, we don't want to just be housewives, we want to work, we want to be outside the home, and the men are like, we don't want to just be success objects, we also want to be fathers and we want to be in the home. But then we get to like the myth of male power in this era where he's kind of saying that like the divorce courts are sexist, favoring women, and they never give rights of like paternity or like custody to men, and then men are required to pay custody sometimes falsely and under like false paternity and all this stuff, which honestly, like in doing the research for this episode, like I was a little bit ignorant to some of these issues, and I will say after like researching some of it, I am a little bit like, and I know like we know someone that had a false paternity situation. Like his wife went and like slept with someone else, and then she had the baby, and he only found out like later into the child's life that like the baby was not his. And then I also met someone in an Uber recently that was trying to get custody over his child because the mother is an addict, and he like has not been able to, and he's fighting and he's fighting and he's fighting. So it's like, even though like we think often about, you know, fathers don't want to be involved with their kids and they're not there and all of that stuff, there is a good amount of fathers who want to be. And what this started as was them arguing that there needs to be better protections within the government for those fathers to be able to have the rights to be in their child's lives. But where it takes a dark turn is blaming women for everything.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's like, they're not like the court and like the laws and everything. It's like not giving fathers the choice to even make that right decision, because it's like they all just are considered as like deadbeat dads. Like it's like a thing. And it's like my dad's been to divorce court like he's going on round 2. Yeah, round 2. Like God. He's had it in like I've seen a different perspective, you know, like because he genuinely does want to be in our lives and like pays for everything. And it's like I feel like even if it's like not all fathers don't want to be in their kids' lives, and like for the ones that do, like they're not set up to like be given that chance. Like, is there like obviously there's maternity leave, like is there not like fathers get leave too? Or no?
So they were in the men's liberation movement of second wave feminists. They were arguing for that. They were like, we want maternity leave because we don't want this just to fall on women. And that's where it was like, and this is it's a feminist issue as well, right? Because the more that we have fathers able to care for kids, it frees up women. Like it is more of an equal partnership and all of that. So they were fighting for paternity. And now there is a lot of places have paternity leave. It's just shorter. But the other thing I do want to say about this whole paternity conversation too is like, once we get to the MRAs, which we're going to talk about soon, like some of them, and the reason that feminists oppose it is because some of them argue about at what point the man has a right to start claiming like ownership of the child or like custody of the child and all of that stuff. And women say, well, once a woman is pregnant and she takes the child to term, like that is completely different because it affects her body completely differently. But I think, so it's like, it is a little bit like of a difficult conversation because I definitely agree with that. Like this woman just like broke her back for 9 months to give birth to this child. Like, you know, in a lot of ways, women that want to be with their child, like should have custody, but the conversation is just how the courts are, I guess, a little bit, you know, they're sexist as well. And it is sexism because it is sexist to think that a woman will be a better parent just because she is a woman.
Right.
You know, like
no,
that's,
it really
that's bad
is.
for women too.
And it's like none of these things could like exist without the other one, you know? Like there really are so many parallels. And I know that's the whole fucking episode, but it's like, I'm already just like, it's like men wouldn't have what they have if they didn't like have women to oppress, and like the same way vice versa. Like it's like, it's sexism on both ends, like not just towards women, but towards men too, with like just like not even setting them up for the chance. And like,
And this is like where we start to see like a real, because I will say like when it comes to the white feminists, like going back and doing the research, like they were not very supportive of like white men or men in general's like breaking down gender roles and like escaping patriarchy. They were very focused on their rights, which is understandable because they were more oppressed, but they weren't supportive or even really calling men into the movement. And Black women, on the other hand, were in their feminist spaces because they also were oppressed by gender. So like from the beginning, Black feminists were like seeing men's issues because they were seeing the ways in which Black men were targeted by police or weren't getting jobs because of racism, like all of that stuff. So like Black women have always been more like empathetic to men's issues because of the extra layer of race. And like even though white men are at the hierarchy of like American socio whatever power, there are still issues in terms of like class and when it comes to the family and when it comes to the job, that even if we want to take them out of it, because I always think about it like this, it's like I hate to say white men are oppressed, right? That is like makes me want to throw up in my mouth, like shut the fuck up. But every time that we put him in these certain boxes and we do these things to him, it falls on women. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like by the divorce courts being this way, it falls on women. By men not being able to express their emotions, it doubles the emotional labor for women.
It all just tumbles down the line.
Right. And like we do during this time, there is a lot of work that is being done to include the conversation. But Warren, I think to a fault, is almost like, you guys don't care about us, it's your fault or whatever. Like to a point, he should have been more patient. Like it's like, they're still like it's a lot going on that we're trying to figure out here.
Right. And it's like to a point, like no, like they didn't care about you, and it's like they didn't care about you because from their perspective it's like you are the enemy. Like there's no pedagogy of oppressed at this time, I don't think. Like it's
and they had time for it, because that's the thing. It's like even though it's the system, it's not men. Like it's not men it's not men of today fault. It's the system that was built for years and years and years. White men have always been the best position to change that system.
Right.
So had they wanted to be like, we want to express our emotions more, we want to not just be success objects, whatever, they waited until women were like, oh, we want rights to actually like address some of this stuff.
Right.
You know, they've had time.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, who could have fixed it if it wasn't them?
Right, exactly. It took until women were like, hey, the system's not really right, for men to be like, oh, you're right, the system's not really right.
Yeah, like,
but then they took that info and kind of went the wrong way with it. So the last thing of the 1990s is there was a big debate about the feminization of men. Because of the men that did join the civil rights movement and the feminist movement, the broader culture from the 80s, Ronald Reagan, masculinity was thriving. We're kind of saying like men are getting more feminine. What's happening? Gay men were also becoming like more of a thing. They were more out. They were more proud. Also Kurt Cobain, like the whole grunge era of like music as well. People were like, oh, he's too soft. He's too quiet and not outspoken, but the opposite of outspoken. And he was very aligned with the riot girl movement as well. So you get this kind of like, what is it? Like culture crisis, like moral panic that all the boys are getting too soft.
Okay.
And then the last thing of the 90s before we move into the 2000s, when the third wave of feminism continues, is we have Alex Jones founds InfoWars in 1996. And if you guys aren't aware, Alex Jones is still a very, very prominent figure in the alt-right. And he essentially established his platform promoting conspiracy theories and anti-establishment rhetoric, and later misogynistic and anti-feminist views. But it's all about, like, he'll later go on to say that Sandy Hook didn't happen. He'll go on to say that, like, there's things in the water that are making men, like, more, like, feminine. He'll, like, hate on, like, trans rights. He's very, like, conspiracy theorist, like, lead to QAnon, like, all of that, like, in favor of Trump, like, that whole sector. Yeah.
Okay.
So this starts. All right, so moving into the 2000s, everyone thought the world was going to end. The World Wide Web had just started, and we have a lot going on. So we have Sex and the City started in the 90s, but it goes on into the 2000s where we start to see more images of liberated women in their 30s, not being married, taking on the city, having casual sex, talking about their sex lives. We also have the Twin Towers, 9/11. In 2001, and this was a big era, if you remember, of like the military. Like it was like proud to be an American, like thank God for our firefighters, a lot of Islamophobia going on, but it was very much like celebrate our veterans, celebrate masculinity, all of that stuff. So we start to see the alpha male ideal kind of like emerge, and this is coming off of like Robert Greene had published the 48 Laws of Power in the 90s. And then there was also David Dita's The Way of the Superior Man, which was in 97. It also starts to become popular in the 2000s as well. So this is an era of like almost like hyper masculinity. And then we also kind of get hyper femininity. Hyper masculinity too. We have sports culture starts to be like really, really big. We get action movies and superheroes. And then on the women's side of things, you have Britney Spears, you have Christina Aguilera. We start to get Paris Hilton, Nicole Richie, kind of like the bimbo, like ultra feminine aesthetic. And then like the super skinny ideal. There's a lot of slut shaming that's going on, specifically with like Britney Spears and like Justin Timberlake. And then also we start to have the era of mommy bloggers, which will set the groundwork for blogging in general and also influencer culture. But that's kind of a lot of what's going on in this era.
Yeah, like obviously, like you were born in 98 too, right? Yeah. So it's like, this is where I'm kind of like, okay, I was like alive type shit now, what we're talking about. But I don't know. I feel like it's interesting in the fact that like men started to go in on their masculinity, like women in on their femininity. But I do feel like feminism at this time, like there was still so much internalized misogyny. Like I don't really think like women were like taking things back necessarily. Like it still kind of was giving like women like hating themselves in a sense. Like this was like the heroin chic era and like wanting to be like, you know, America's version of beauty. Like that reminds me of this a lot now. And it's kind of like we talk about decentering men, like men were very much centered, like like people were like down for it, like they were happy to center them, meaning like a lot of white women just like at the forefront, like in the media and things like that. And like it reminds me of like 17 magazine during this time. It's like all about how to get a man. Like it was like their version
even
of
Sex and the City too was like that. It was like
it's like the version of girl power back then was like very like male centered and like not really about like embracing individual femininity as women as much.
Exactly. And also like the masculinity was huge on the black man side of things as well, because this is where we get like a lot of like the rap like era, like where it was like a lot of like wife beaters, like tough, hard, like masculinity, a lot of like rapping about like the prison industrial system, like selling drugs in the 80s, like that kind of stuff. And then you also get like the hyper femininity of like Britney Spears, like Destiny's Child, Beyonce. So it was a lot of like tough men and then like skinny, like pretty kind of like girl sort of thing. It was very like blingy era, like
and very sexualized in a male gaze way.
Yeah.
Like,
but
more
people
intensely
were
than now.
Yeah, and people were owning their sexuality. Like, there was, like, it was weird because women were owning their sexuality more and, like, wearing, like, skimpy or kind of, like, outfits. But there was so much slut shaming that was going on during this time, too, that'll carry into the mid-2000s. Okay, so moving into the mid-2000s, we see the ideals of masculinity change a little bit, and we get the whole idea of metrosexual guys coming into the picture with guys like David Beckham, Justin Timberlake, Brad Pitt. Later, you have Ryan Gosling, Zac Efron. Here's some pictures of that. We have like guys wearing Merces, like man purses. Yeah. Like they care more about skincare, grooming practices, which like I guess men just weren't grooming before this. I don't know, but like for some reason it's a big deal, right? And I do want to think like that some of it is influenced by queer men. And then we also have the sensitive new age guy or a snag. And this is popularized by boy bands and pop icons like the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. And then there's also celebrities like Jared Leto and John Mayer that are more like sensitive, artistic types. Kind of, and it's weird because it's like we had this with like Kurt Cobain and stuff like that. And even in the 70s, like men were dressing like what we would consider today is to be like a little bit more like feminine.
Right.
But there was like very much like with these boys groups, there was like this whole like, oh my God, boys are getting like, men are getting softer.
Yeah.
They're getting sensitive, but like the girls loved it and everything. And we had the Beatles before that too. So it's like, I don't know why we have these moral panics every time like men decide to brush their teeth.
I think it's just like waves, bro. Like I think shit comes in and out of our culture, honestly, because it's like during this time too, there were also like rugged traditional men that were still like, you know,
a lot of like superhero movies, like
right.
action.
So I think it's like the duality of it all, but it's like it's also like who's doing it. It's like the Backstreet Boys were like fucking iconic, so like of course that's gonna like make its way into it, and like a lot of guys probably were like, oh, like what they're doing is working or whatever, but it's like they literally like saying about their feelings, like type shit.
But like men have been doing it that like forever. Like even when you think about like someone like Frankie Valli, like right, like he like their love songs, like it was like more normal back then. But like it like at some point we feminized it. You know, like it's weird how it's like we kind of tend to, which is why partly I wanted to make this timeline, because I'm like, guys, like I think we like black out during history and like forget things about like, okay, like even when you're looking at the outfits of these guys and stuff, like very similar to like what men were wearing in the 1970s to a certain degree, with like bell-bottom pants and like open like chest showing like shirts, and like, you know, like our idea of what is masculine and what is feminine like keeps changing.
I think people lose track of it too, because like the present moment seems like the most pressing thing to be focused on. And it's like there's an idea of, it's like, well, who cares, like whatever, it was so different back then. But it's like, as you're saying, it's like, no, there's a lot of parallels between back then and now. It's like we just don't think about it as much because like we have iPhones and like whatever,
right?
You know?
Exactly, yeah. And this is the time too where the World Wide Web is a thing. So like culture is, and MTV is very big. Culture is still very like mainstream. Like there's like kind of like a monoculture to a degree, but it's starting to trickle down into like more subcultures that are like visible in modern media. Because like there were always subcultures, but they were like very sub because they weren't like on like the radio as much or like TV as much. Like it wasn't as much, it was much more of a monoculture than like it's becoming. But then in 2003, Lawrence versus Texas decriminalizes sodomy. So gay sex is legal now, which is so insane that it wasn't before. And in 2004, we get Bell Hooks publishing The Will to Change Men, Masculinity, and Love. And this is where it's like building out this timeline. Like, again, like I have to keep pointing to Black women and Black queer women feminists, because it's like I kept thinking like, you know, women are to a degree leaving men out of the conversation. Like white women are like a lot. And like we'll see them bring them back in like in certain points. But Black women have always had men as a part of the conversation and like didn't see it as like a counter to their movement, but saw it as crucial to their movement because of the lines of race. Yeah.
And then you
like,
think about like 4B and boy sober in America. It's like, damn, bitch. Like it's really exhausting. And like even the men are trash era. And it's like, I understand it. And it's like Bell Hooks was probably angry with how she's like been treated by men too. Like
and
both
she was
things
in the
can
book.
be true. Like
she was talking about her father and how like much her and her family like bore the brunt of like his anger and his repression and his aggression. And she like quotes Terrence Real talking about the psychological patriarchy, who's like a white man who was like a psychiatrist that was doing stuff in the 90s. But like, yeah, like she talks about it in terms of like race and gender, and also pointing to the fact that things are not going to get better for women until they get better for men as well. Like you can't just like keep lifting up women and not like fix what's wrong with men, because it keeps us down. All
like
of us.
you were saying, like it falls, like everything that like men are dealing with like falls on us more.
Yeah.
Like as a society, like everyone, it's like, let alone it's like her experience in her family, but it's like also it affects everyone as well, just because it keeps the system like fucking running smoothing, well-oiled machine. Like
and that's also the problem with a lot of like the white men and MRAs, men's rights activists, whatever, that we're going to get into in a little bit, is that they're like, oh, like we weren't included in the conversation at all. We weren't included in the conversation at all. And they weren't really that much with white women feminists. I mean, white women feminists said they wanted equality. That's what they said. That's what they said. That's what they said. But they weren't pushing for men's rights or whatever, or the dismantling of gender roles completely from a male perspective, I guess. But Black feminists were so like there were definitely conversations going on, and among white women too. It wasn't like there were no conversations, but these men like to act like there was nothing going on at all that was including men, which is just simply not the case.
And then they chose not to include us either, like in their men's rights activists. So you have like two exclusionary movements that are like horrible, and then you have like Black feminists, Black queer feminists that like are getting it the whole time, but it's like nobody's listening.
Yeah. And it's also like the men's expectation almost that like women will do it for them. Like even when they talk about like the divorce courts, and it's iffy because it's like feminists did protest against some men's liberation movements like for these things. Like they did protest against them, but it was like when men are saying, you know, it's women's fault and stuff like that, I don't think they would be, I mean, it was like iffy. Like women were kind of protesting like men going after like this type of stuff, like opening up more domestic violence. Like it was weird, you know, but it's also like if you want it, then okay, like get your men together and do it, was kind of women's whole like argument. Like, why are you making us make it
do
a thing in our feminism?
Yeah,
you know, so. And then we also have Facebook is released in 2004. And this is where we all start to connect. I mean, MySpace was a thing before this, but Facebook, you know, as we talked about in our humiliation dating content episode, like a lot of like what is Pop the Balloon, rate these people, all of that stuff started really on Facebook when people were like my status for a like my status
Crazy
for
enough.
a rate.
Yeah.
You know, all of that stuff. So we start to see like dating play out more on social platforms, which will completely change the dynamics of dating for eternity. And then during this era as well, right after Facebook came out, we start to see the emergence of pickup artists, or PUAs. And in 2005, Neil Strauss wrote The Game, which is an expose of the pickup artist community that was featured in the New York Times as a bestseller. And between 2007 and 2008, there was a television show that aired on VH1. And so this entire community was very much built around the game of picking up women, essentially. So it was techniques, strategies, and mindsets.
Giving manosphere.
Yes, this is like very early manosphere. And it's so like interesting when I was doing this timeline, because I'm like putting things together, but like how Facebook came out the year before and then we get like The Game. It's almost like people started to see things like more, you know, like personal dynamics, dating dynamics, like more publicly on these like platforms and stuff like that.
So
and I think
true.
like and a lot of it is like tailored around like picking up women, like not just in person but online too. So it's like weird.
Yeah.
But it's all techniques, strategies, and mindsets that help men pick up women. It often involves objectifying women and promoting harassment techniques like negging, insulting women to overthrow their confidence. So a lot of manipulation that we'll see become really, really popular with Andrew Tate. And a lot of men today, I've seen some on TikTok, like post-election, and like I shout out to these men like so hardcore, the ones that like did get into the manosphere and the alt-right because of pickup artistry, and then later got out and kind of like explained why. But a lot of men enter the manosphere, incels, all that stuff through wanting to figure out ways to pick up women. And another big part of like the whole pickup artist movement, manosphere, whatever, is analyzing social dynamics to improve romantic and sexual success. So this is also where you start to get like the rating and the scaling of women. So being like, oh, if she's a 7, she'll do this. If she has this job or this much money, like this is the strategy. Like you're kind of like getting like the 48 laws of power, like weaseling its way in there. Like they're all overthinking and overanalyzing this shit when they really just need to be a nice fucking person that went to therapy and is in touch with their emotions. But we know men, they're psychological patriarchy. They're not thinking about that. They are just like over fucking doing it. And also because when we think about it in the context of this timeline, this is a time where the hyper masculinity is very much a thing. On the white men's side, on black men, on all men of any color, you have like 6-pack abs, like very like groomed, like a nice 5 o'clock shadow, like nice hair, like the male beauty standards start to emerge as what the incels will later call like chads kind of thing. Like it was a little bit more like broken up in the like 90s and the 1900s and stuff, because there wasn't just as much visibility into like what people looked like all the time. But then you start to get this social pressure with like online platforms and seeing what other people are doing and stuff, that men start to like look at their own beauty standards and are kind of like, oh, like this is what you need to do to get a girl.
It's like that's all they think they're good for too, though, is like getting the girl. Like that's the only thing they can like relate over and like strive to improve, like
because it's a sign of status for them,
right? So it's just like that's how like the parallels again, like it plays like hand in hand. Like if women, that's really crazy. And I'm just like, pickup artistry, like what the fuck are we talking about? Like, are we really just, to me that's artistry?
Like, to me it's like sex work for women.
Like,
you know what I'm saying? Like when they teach you like sex works tips, like that type of stuff. Because I feel like, I mean, in Cosmo and everything,
you mean
like
sex work for men? Like,
yeah, but like in a weird way, because like there was a lot of like in Cosmo and Sex in the City and like stuff like that, like this is how to flirt, this is how to kiss him, this is how to make him want you. Like there was a lot of that in the early 2000s, but there's always been a certain level to which like women don't have to do much. You know, like
at the end of the day, they don't really need the tips in the same way.
Yeah, like there was a lot of movies in the early 2000s that like the power dynamics and the gender roles were very like flopped, where like women, like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, it wasn't that movie, or it's like you're trying to get the guy kind of thing. Like there was that, but like this is like the opposite side of things. And of course, like they have to be so strategic, like they're playing chess. Like I don't know what we're doing.
Oh my God, it's so crazy.
It's disgusting. But this whole pickup artist, that everything from the game will eventually evolve. I was gonna put it in each individual date as we move down the timeline, but I'm like, I'm just making it a section, and we just got to keep it in our mind as we move on to 2008. But the first 2 forums for pickup artistry were developed in 2008, and they had over 1,000 active monthly users and reached close to their maximum number of monthly posts. So this was around the same time that subreddits were created for PUA, or pickup artistry, and seduction. Okay.
What the fuck? I can't. I've never heard pickup artistry in my fucking life.
No, it is like a huge entry point.
Like that is what Andrew Tate is like doing, right?
Yeah, like pickup. Yeah,
but in a way, like
no, but his is different, because it's like this was originally supposed to be like pickup artistry to get a woman to sleep with you, or to get into a relationship, like how to like woo a woman. Like I guess like what is it?
Which is like a little less like harmful than like Andrew Tate, because like what you said, like he focuses more on like how to manipulate a woman to like do whatever you want.
But you get this.
Like
you start to get, because it's like, what is like chivalry, right? Like, I don't understand where we lost chivalry and we decided to go into pickup artistry. It was probably this book, The Game.
Yeah, like do something heroic.
Right. But they do, there's levels to it, right? Because there's a certain level of like, okay, like you do this, you compliment her, you do this, you invite her to dinner, and then you hope she sleeps with you. Like there's levels of toxicity. There's like the innocent stuff, and then it gets to that level of like you're expecting her to sleep with you. And then there's a whole nother level that gets into like manipulation. Like you are intending to manipulate this woman to get her to fall in love with you so that she will do whatever you want, which is what it will develop into when we get to Andrew Tate and like Fresh and Fit and all of that stuff. But there was also another subreddit board called Roosh V, which morphed into a very different community and then became very aligned with the alt-right as well. And then we don't see a decline really of these kind of like pickup artistry boards until around 2017 and like 2018, which is like where the Me Too movement kind of hits, because people start to reanalyze like what's creepy, and women are like, and men, we'll talk about this I think a little bit more in like our next episode too, but like men start to be afraid of hitting on a woman in public or going up to women because they're afraid that they'll be seen as creepy, which is in a lot of ways a good thing.
Right.
You know, but a lot of women then got upset and are like, why don't men like approach me anymore? But it's like there was like a different whatever, but like in my mind, that's a fucking good thing to a degree. Because like a lot of men were in this innocently, but ended up like manipulated really.
Like it's
by
like
the
a
bad
cult.
actors.
Yeah. The bad actors. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just terrifying. And like I didn't know like this was like really born like during this time. Like I feel like it's just like so intense now and blatant in our faces. Like yes, there was like Facebook and MySpace, but still like now it's just like 10 times worse. So I feel like it makes sense why I never like heard of pickup artistry before and like where it comes from.
Yeah.
But like to know that like this is where it comes from essentially, and like it's just gotten 10 times worse. It was already bad, but it's really scary, and like it does make you look at like the men content online a little bit differently, because it's like we say like, oh, they don't have anything, but it's like they've had this since the 2000s and like only
but
this.
it morphed and
But
it
it
got
morphed.
like and it got worse. And that's the thing is like exactly like, and this is how you see like, again, like it's so weird when we say men are oppressed or whatever, but like the ideas of men and where they're building community is around getting women and like manipulating women. And it's a lot of like sad, lonely guys that will eventually become like incels and all of that stuff. But like they really want women. Like a lot of men, that to them success is like money and a woman, you know, like that is what they want. So like they are building community on these forums. And sex, they want to have sex, and in toxic masculinity is playing out. But like you see the ways in which like some of them are innocent and then will become really evil, but they're being manipulated. It's so weird. Like it's so multi-leveled, you know, because I'm thinking about those TikToks that I've seen of the men that say they got into the alt-right and everything because of pickup artistry, and they really just had good intentions. Like they had a crush on a girl and they were like what, like just like us reading Cosmo or something like that. They were like, what do I do to like get her to like me? Like when you think about it like that, it's like, oh, like
yeah,
he had like really good intentions, but then the rabbit hole that it becomes is
because the
so
other thing
dark.
is like girls talk about that shit with each other, like what can we do to like stand out? But it's like, I mean, I'm not a man, but I feel like they don't do that as much. So it makes sense that like they would want to go on Reddit and like be anonymous as fuck and like finally get their feelings out.
Yeah.
So it's like it could have been like a good thing. Like it could have stayed a good thing.
Pickup artistry is a crazy name. Like if it was like courting women,
I don't
like
understand the
chivalry,
artistry. There's no art. Y'all don't know how to be
like,
artists when you pick us up.
But it's like, we can't sit here and lie like all the stuff we had for women was healthy. A lot of it was toxic as fuck too. Like we didn't have like pickup art. Like I don't know, but we did have a lot of toxic shit. This is how you make out with a guy. Like, this is what you do to attract him. Like, on both sides, like, you start to see this, like, gendering of relationships and the roles that you're supposed to do in order to start dating someone.
It just hits so different for some reason, though. Like, I'm kind of just like, well, like, that wasn't the worst thing, though. So, like, we're good. And, like, but I'm also, like, so, like, not sheltered, but, like, I just, like, grew up in a home where I knew that, like, that was bullshit. But, like, I feel like most people, like, didn't know that was bullshit. Like, they didn't, like, talk about that with their parents. So it's like they were affected, honestly, by Cosmo.
Yeah, because I think about some white women that I know where it's like their version of feminism is very much like that. Like, yeah, we grew up with a lot of, like, 17, a lot of, like, this culture, like, the woman has to get the guy, like, da-da-da-da. And then, like, their idea now and why they're decentering men is because they don't know how to be in relationships with men when they're not following these codes of, like, the women's version of pickup artistry.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
And
so
they
it's
don't
like,
even know, like, what their feminism looks like when it doesn't involve men at, like...
Or, like, interpersonal
like, not
relationships.
involve men, but, like, yeah, like, what you were saying at the beginning, too, it's like, they need to, like, uplift their, like, true authentic femininity and not just, like, what it means to be a woman, like, existing with men.
Yeah.
And it's like, but when you do include men in your feminism, it shouldn't be, like, about you anymore. It should just be about how patriarchy affects and oppresses men.
Yeah.
So, yeah, people are just, like, and it's confusing. Like, it's not easy. And it's, like, just so crazy, too. It's like, let's remember that, like, gender is literally a construct, and, like, having a dick or a pussy doesn't make you a woman or a man. And it's just, like, obviously during this time, that is, like, very newfound ideas by mainstream people. Obviously, people experiencing, like, gender dysphoria always knew, but it's like, yeah, like, and gender's a construct, and it's constructing because we're like, it's like, yeah, it's just, it's so crazy.
It is.
But the answer is, because I used to honestly be like, the answer is, like, not to separate men and women, not to talk about it like that, blah, blah, blah. Like, gender is not even real, so why are we talking about it? Like, no, we do need to talk about it. And it doesn't mean that you think, like, not, like, non-binary people don't exist and, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, they obviously do, but it's like, this is the reality of our country. Like, the history is dark, and, like, it's been like this. And so we do need to talk about it and separate it.
Yeah, we need to acknowledge it. I mean, especially today, like, and we'll get into it in the next episode, but it's like when women are like, oh, men don't, like, they're not chivalrous, they don't hit on me anymore, like, any of that stuff. It's like they were so lost. Like, they're, like, developing these message boards and then, like, going down these, like, fucking rabbit holes, and then we get Me Too, and then they're all afraid to hit on women, and then it's like, but then it's also like, if you want a man to do all of that courting and everything, then you're also still reinforcing, like, gender roles to, like, a certain degree.
But it's also like, I do get why women are like, oh my god, like, men don't want to hit on me anymore. Like, I get wanting that, but at the same time, it's like, if a man, like, is afraid to hit on you, like, it kind of means that, like, he knows what's up, because the men that are not afraid to hit on you, like, they don't know what's up, and, like, maybe they're the ones to pull some crazy shit. So I personally get sad because I feel like the men that aren't hitting on me, and I genuinely want them to, because they're good guys and they're afraid, they'll never do it, though, because but then it's like, well, maybe they're not good guys, like, they're not fully getting it, though. Like, it's not about you, it's about the system. And that's why we need
to talk about it, exactly, because I feel like there are a lot of really good guys out there,
but, like, that, where? Because I don't see them, or
but they're, like, they're shy and they're scared. Like, every guy, like, they're like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the good ones,
yeah, you're right.
Are, like, afraid of, like,
yes,
you know,
like, I can think of now, like, literally, like, I know, like,
yeah,
and it's, yeah. So in 2008 to 2007, we have what we call the Great Recession. I feel so weird, guys. Like, history is crazy, but the market essentially crashed, and this is, like, has to do with, like, the housing crisis, and, like, and obviously houses are, like, a really big deal in the economy. So, like,
the movie For Short, what is it? That big movie, they released it later, but it talks, they were, like, selling mortgages to people that, like, couldn't afford them, and then the whole market crashed.
I'm sure someone at home knows what you're talking about.
And oil's expensive because the war, and there's
right. So it's like, this was all going on, like, during our gender wars timeline, like, just contextualizing things, essentially. And then we have the infamous sex tape with Miss Kim K and Ray J, okay? Everyone remembers this. If you were 90s, 2000s, like, this shit was crazy. And, like, now looking at it through a pro-sex work lens, like, even crazier. But anyways, the sex tape was made in 2003, and it was leaked and conspired that Miss Kris Jenner was like, she leaked it, okay? Like, we don't know who leaked it, but I feel like they leaked it. We don't know, though. Either way, I fully support it. And it initially brought a lot of negative scrutiny. Like, obviously, like, the media fucking trashed her, right? Like, there's no OnlyFans. Like, there's none of that shit. Like, if you're a sex worker, it's like you're shunned from your family. No one knows about it. You're hiding it. Like, this was really bad. And she was young, no? Like, I don't know how old she was.
She was young, and it was with a black man, too.
Right. And, like, then their whole, So, their whole thing with black men is anyways.
Yeah, and their whole fetishization of black men is, like, a whole thing. But, like,
culture,
in the media, it's also, like, oh, my God, like, this, top exclusive white woman that's hanging out with Paris Hilton has a sex tape with this, like, black man. And then we start to see, like, a lot of slut shaming going on.
And that's what shot her to fame, because before that, like, she was kind of like a nobody. Like, it sounds horrible, but like,
she was like a sidekick to Paris Hilton. Like, they were big, and that's the thing I did want to mention too.
She cleaned her closet, like, remember?
Yeah, because when I mentioned the mommy blogging, like, contextually, also, we have Martha Stewart in the 90s starts to create what I think is really the start of influencer culture. And she's like doing the home, whatever. Then we have mommy bloggers. But like Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian are considered like the originators of the selfie and like influencer stuff, right? But like this really skyrockets Kim Kardashian to be who she's going to be. And she also becomes, in a lot of ways, a feminist icon.
Yeah, because it's also like this was kind of like a girl boss situation too. It's like she got so much scrutiny for this in the media and in real life. Like, I'm sure it was horrible, but like she didn't hide away. Like, she kept going and like rather use this negative media attention to like amplify her career, like economically and otherwise. So it's like I feel like a lot of people now, when talking about this, like talk about it as like a buyer marketing move. Like, Kim K was ahead of her time. Like, they really knew what they were doing. And like now it's like you look at her and it's like she kind of like capitalizes off of her body still, but like more so like in an ironic way. Like, she knows what she's doing. Like, it's articulative or it's calculated. Not articulative. But yeah, it was a huge moment. Like, obviously I remember that. Everyone remembers that. And then so we already had Facebook, MySpace, and all those things like Reddit, subreddits with the pickup artistry. But now in 2007, we have Twitter being released. And like, we all know how Twitter is. So it's like you look at Facebook, you look at Twitter, it's like things were getting like more X-rated, like explicit and things like that. I mean, obviously we had pornography and things like that, but I feel like that was huge. And like everyone wanted Twitter. Like, I remember I would like begged my mom for Twitter for years until I turned like 12 or 13 and she wouldn't let me. And literally on 11:59 p.m. of the eve of my 13th birthday, your girl was making I Love Selena Twitter page. Like, I would like, it was the thing to have.
No, same.
And you get like Kim K's now like tweeting on Twitter and like all of that. So yeah, Twitter was fucking huge.
And it starts like the beginning of the kind of like attention span shortening to a degree too, right? Because you have only so many characters. You can only do these smaller
and even think
tweets.
About that. Facebook, you could like pop off in like an essay if you wanted to.
Right, but like now we start to get like shorter like little statuses and then discourse about everything that's going on. Hashtags start to become a thing. So
and like my status for a rate on Facebook, like I feel like rating on Twitter was like just like way less wholesome to a degree.
Yeah. Twitter fights too, subtweeting.
Twitter fights are still iconic in 2024, like with Jay-Z and Carisha.
Like, or even Zola, like the movie where she did the whole Twitter thread that became the movie, like iconic.
Right, like an entire movie. Yeah.
So then also in moving into 2008, we have our boy. He's not our boy. We don't really fuck with him. Paul Elam. Okay. Yeah. Elam backwards is male, but that is in fact his real last name. And he was very, very inspired by our boy, who's also not our boy, Warren Farrell. If you guys remember from the men's liberation movement in connection to Gloria Steinem and the feminist movement back in the second wave of feminism. So Paul,
he looks very tall.
He had a dream, a semi-truck, a laptop, and he was driving 10 to 12 hours a day. And he read, the myth of male power, and he was like, I'm going to do this shit. So in 2008, he started blogging under the name The Happy Misogynist. Okay. And then he starts the blog A Voice for Men.
Yeah.
Which is, the men's human rights movement. So I'm going to read a little bit from what is right now their mission statement. I don't know how much it's changed since the past. He says very different. It's complicated. So they say.
But it's alive and well.
It's alive and well. So they say the men's human rights movement, MHRM, is a complicated and often misunderstood social phenomenon. We address a wide variety of issues that affect men and boys and ultimately women as well as the culture as a whole. Additionally, there's a great deal of disinformation about this movement on the internet and in mainstream media. With that in mind, we offer the following outline of our mission and objectives. And then blah, blah, blah. They say women have more rights now in the past 50 years, quoting, the Warren Farrell's book. And then they go on to say, what used to be cooperation between sexes, which was it ever really cooperation, or was it women in superior roles?
Yeah, but anyway, what are you talking? Okay.
Right. What used to be cooperation between sexes is now, this is their favorite phrase, gynocentric parasitism that inhabits every level of men's existence from cradle to coffin.
Not cradle to coffin.
The efforts to enhance the rights of women have become toxic efforts to undermine the rights of men. So they're, again, blaming the feminist movement on men not getting rights and whatever. Right. AVFM's mission focuses pretty much exclusively on changing the cultural dialogue. We have never, this is what's insane. Okay. It's focused on cultural dialogue, not political action. We have never lobbied politicians for laws. We don't seek a, quote, violence against men act or even changes in divorce and custody law. So what are we fucking talking about? We admire, report on, and support those undertaking such efforts, but that is not the same thing as doing them. We are certain, though, that changing the cultural narrative, forcing a new dialogue, opens the door for changing laws in a positive way, even if we are not an active part of those efforts. And it's to a degree, I get it, right? Our whole podcast, we are talking about feminism and gender discourse and all this stuff. We are not lobbying, okay? We are also trying to change the cultural dialogue.
One more time, but lobbying.
We are not.
What is that?
Oh, what is law? I thought you were having me repeat myself. Lobbying. So pretty much you can lobby for a law to be created. Groups will get together and advocate for this issue and kind of push it forward to become a bill and push it forward for people to be elected.
So they're saying they're not doing that.
They're not doing any of that. This is just a platform for ideas kind of thing, which I don't want to completely hate on because again, we do that to a certain degree.
Right.
But again, they're called the, the men's human rights movement. So, okay. But they do say we support and endorse only nonviolent reactions to feminist governance. And in fact, are trying to prevent future acts of violence that feminist governance has already inspired. So they're saying that feminism has transpired a lot of violence, and they're saying we're not violent, but it's y'all, and we're trying to stop what y'all are doing. And then they're also saying that they, of course, advocate for all the same stuff that Warren Farrell did, such as men's domestic and sexual violence issues, false paternity, dangerous jobs, being success objects, all of this stuff. And they are the first real platform that I can see in my research that adopts this red pill blue pill ideology. So just to briefly explain this, because we're going to get back to it later, because this is consistent and still heavily prevalent today.
Right. Well, let's just remind ourselves we're in 2008 right now.
Yeah, we're in 2008. We are laying the fucking groundwork. So red pill, blue pill. In the Matrix.
I love that movie.
I do too, but except the way it's been co-op.
Oh, yeah.
So if there's the blue pill, and if you take the blue pill, you will live your life as you always have and know nothing will have changed, like whatever.
But the
if
red
you
pill, you seek the real truth.
You know what really happened, and you are like woken up and you understand. And like to them, Warren Farrell's book, The Myth of Male Power, is the red pill. The belief that men are actually the ones that are oppressed in society by women. So once they are red pilled, they believe that, feminists are the enemy. They really have no rights, whatever. So,
bro,
a couple other things that A Voice for Men has done is in 2011, and again, we're jumping timelines, but this is just what they're going to do later on.
Right.
They created the website Register Her, which is a wiki page that was listed, that listed names, addresses, and other personal information, essentially doxing women who were convicted of murdering or raping men. Okay, so this is similar to like Me Too, but like for men.
Right.
And then later the site's operatives expanded the registry to include women they judged guilty of false rape accusations or anti-male bigotry. So what started as kind of like maybe a good thing, maybe because, women can be sexual assaulters, women can be domestic abusers, like that is real.
Yeah,
developed
for sure.
into a lot of misogyny and a lot of like, false rape accusations happen, guys. Like they do happen. It is a thing. Male bigotry, I guess, is a thing.
But
like
real accusations happen more than false.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's make sure everybody. I know you know that, but
right. So they start to create, and it's funny because I'm looking at this and it was kind of reminding me of like the Are We Dating the Same Guy Facebook pages that'll come later. Like, again, we're stealing from the men's like playbook to a certain degree, but they began publishing personal information about women who participated in protests against the men's rights movement and who mocked the men's rights movement on social media or publicly supported feminism. They had a conference for advocacy about the effects of
doxing, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know what
and
that
then they
means.
had a conference for men that was advocating for the effect of unemployment on men, post-economic crisis, and also the possibility of developing a male birth control pill, which is not a bad thing. Like that's a good thing. There were some seeds of good in there.
Right,
and
that's
then
fire.
we love that. And then they also attempted to increase care for men who had served in the military.
Like this is crazy because it's like what you said, like they're kind of, some things are good. Like,
right.
Like, yes, like men that served in the military, like do deserve like a special care just for their man selves. Like they do deserve that.
Do. And you know what's
But when
crazy?
you say that in the same breath, it's like all this misogynistic shit. No one's going to take you seriously. And it's like, I'm like, I don't feel bad for you because I feel like you fucked up more than like you did right.
Right.
But it's like, it sucks that like in that, it's like the men that like are like good men or whatever, like they don't get to have that heard because they're ruining it. Like that is something we should be speaking up about. And like, again, like you said, like we know Black queer feminists have been saying that.
Yeah.
But it's like, this guy says it. Oh, he's a white guy. Like someone might actually take him seriously. Like this could be fucking good, but he ruins it. And then there's no male birth control pill.
And that's the reason we need to talk about these. And we do talk about these issues on the women's side of things. But
people, y'all on TikTok do not talk about this shit. Y'all do not talk about this shit.
More because it's like there are so many men who entered this sphere because they were trying to get their child back or like partial custody or something like that, who did go through a domestic violence situation or something of that sort, and then are red-pilled into this entire situation, like there wasn't a space for the men who were like sexually abused, who were like at this time period.
Yeah, and horrible. Like, that is horrible. And that, like, actually breaks my heart. And, like, that has generational impacts on all men because of that.
Exactly.
For sure. It's not funny, but, like, it's just, like, and we used to be scared to talk about this stuff, too, because, like, I would look at people like, oh, yeah, like, men are affected by patriarchy. Like, they're oppressed, too. And I'm like, you're fucking tapped.
You're
but actually, I was
not
tapped.
on our side.
I was not listening to bell hooks, even though I also read that book. It's like I didn't. Yeah. So yep.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yep. And then I do want to also just note this is a trend that we will begin to see with Andrew Tate and everybody else in the future, feminists as well. But things are commercialized very much, and what is his name? Paul Elam.
Yeah, our boy.
He is pocketing quite a bit of money because they.
So because Andrew Tate literally profits off of his whole thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the staff members and contributors are unpaid volunteers, with the exception of the founder, who again is Paul Elam. And then they also sell stuff on the online store, which is called the Red Pill Shop, with red pill memes, t-shirts, phone covers, holiday decorations. And the site also accepts financial donations. And then Elam has been quoted in the past to say, every dollar goes right in my pocket. He also asserts that the money is used to advance the group's cause, but like they don't do any lobbying or anything like that. So it's a little bit like confused. So like, again, we're getting, I think, vulnerable men being preyed upon, because I think a lot of men enter this fear with innocent intentions. Not all of them, some of them are very toxic, but like a good amount of them are that father who's trying to get partial custody of his child, or did have a bad divorce case
and
happen,
no one else,
or is a veteran and is injured. Like, guys get into this because of those reasons and then are pretty much like taken advantage of.
Right.
But I do want to also just know, I'm going to obviously we're going to link this article in the description. I'm not going to go into it too much, but there's this great article from BuzzFeed. I know it's weird that it's from BuzzFeed, but it's about Paul Elam as a human being outside of his job ventures. And they interview his ex-wife and his daughter, who go very much into the fact that he is a deadbeat dad. And everything, all of his problems are to blame on himself. And in fact, the women in his life were very supportive over him starting this business. They were rooting for him. And then he just more and more became an asshole. And they even said that a lot of the stuff that he's doing, he doesn't even really believe in. He just sees an opportunity to get money. So definitely check out that article, because it has a lot of really good insights into what the fuck is really going on.
Yeah. See, and that's why it's like, and like feminists have been side-eyeing men like this whole time for like that exact thing, and then it turns out to be true, and like that's why we hate them. Like, exactly. I don't know, like what are we?
And that's the thing, is like, it's like who I feel bad for in this is not Paul Elam at all, and not even Warren Farrell, because Warren Farrell, like, you had every opportunity, like, you did the wrong thing, but I feel bad for the men who entered innocently,
right?
And didn't, who got taken advantage of. Because I do think, like, especially for an uneducated man, or a man who is like imprisoned by the psychological patriarchy, who doesn't feel comfortable expressing their emotions, talking to other women in their life, other men in their life about what's really going on, and just ends up searching the World Wide Web and comes across one of these blogs that's the only one talking about it. And they're not the only ones talking about it. Women and feminists are talking about these issues.
But like men go to other men.
Exactly. So that's why it's like that is the saddest part of this to me. Like, fuck Paul Elam, but like some of the red
it's like
guys,
the impact. Yeah. And it's like the people that like fall victim to that with innocent intention. It's like they're completely removed from the conversation and of history. It's like you just focus on like the evil man. But and it's like he created more evil men, but it's like they weren't like that to beginning. Like not all. Yeah, I'm not gonna say. Yeah, not all men. I feel like I can't say that.
The hashtag in a little bit too. So
like, why do I? Yeah, okay.
So also in 2008, heavily influenced by A Voice for Men with Paul Elam, we have the MRAs, or men's rights activists, emerging onto the scene. And these men were focused on very similar social issues like paternity, military stuff, false allegations. And they think that, again, feminists discriminate against men. Like, we have this one man from an MRA group that holds a sign that says misogynist, a man who thinks women are intelligent, rational, accountable human beings and expect them to act that way. So, like, that is their whole argument, is like, we're already equal. Stop oppressing us. Like, typical just anti-feminist
like, that makes
shit
no
going
sense,
on.
bro. That's not what the word means.
Literally at all. At all. Like, we are confused.
That's,
we need education.
like, really scary. Okay.
Yeah. And the men's rights subreddit dated back to March in 2008 had the most active number of posts until late 2013. So again, this is a timeline, like, they're coinciding, it's going on, but this is when it starts in 2008. And yeah, so that's them. And then we move still in 2008, actually, sorry. We have Ben Shapiro emerges onto the scene, and this is the only time we're really going to talk about him, but he remains a prominent figure in the manosphere still today. And he gained national attention with his second book, Porn Generation, How Social Liberalism is Corrupting Our Future. And this book critiqued the societal impact of pornography and casual sex, aligning the manosphere's critique of sexual liberation and its potential harm to men's role in society. So he would go on to advocate for the ban on abortion, alt-right politics, and he would describe the political left as believing in an imaginary hierarchy of victimhood, and that, like, terminology would be taken off with the whole right side of politics. He also says that political correctness breeds insanity. And he is very outspoken against safe spaces, especially those on college campuses, and he argues that they go against free speech. He also frequently praises Western culture and Western civilization compared to other cultures, so it's giving very much white supremacy. And yeah, because he literally said, I believe Western civilization is superior to other civilizations. So this is when he starts to gain a platform with his book, but again, only time I'm mentioning him, he will continue to be a prominent figure on the right and in the manosphere. Next, we get into 2009, and we have a journalist named Emma A. Jane, and she identifies the late 2000s, early 2010s as the tipping point when manosphere communities move from the fringes of the internet towards the mainstream. So, like, that's like when A Voice for Men, the blog, is started. This is like when we're going off a cliff. Like, it was before in the little grounds, but World Wide Web, social media makes it bigger. Now we are full-blown getting into the manosphere. And she hypothesizes it was related to the advent of Web 2.0 and social media. So the term manosphere is a play on the word blogosphere, which is like, who says that word?
No one.
And it was believed to have first started in Blogspot of 2009, which is really interesting because I always think of manosphere as like very modern, like 2020s and on.
Yeah, this is news.
Right, but it's been a thing, and I guess it makes sense because it started on the blogs.
So why didn't we catch it earlier?
I'm saying. And it was subsequently popularized by Ian Ironwood, who was a pornography marketer who collected a variety of blogs and forums in a book in the form of The Manosphere, A New Hope for Masculinity. So that began to enter the popular lexicon when news media outlets began to use it in stories about men who had committed acts of misogynistic violence, sexual assault, and online harassment. So pretty quickly we get like manosphere, all men's online content begins to be related to sexual harassment, violence against women, all of that stuff, which is a little bit like interesting to think about as well, because there were also blogs going on during this time that were in the manosphere, man-related, that were not contributing to these like MRA men's rights like ideologies, but they did get grouped in that way. So to a certain degree, I understand why some men not blame feminists, but like are like upset or disenfranchised because the media did very much paint all men's vlogs as this when it wasn't quite that. But again, like, in the context of who's oppressed and everything that's going on, like, let's take a deep breath. Like, you could obviously, like, you're a white man in America, like, speak out against it, do something. I don't know. Journalist Caitlin Dewey argues that the main trends of the manosphere can be reduced to 1, the corruption of modern society by feminism, in violation of inherent sex differences between men and women. So they always argue that men and women are just inherently different.
Yeah.
And feminism is to blame for everything. And number 2, the biggest ideology is the ability of men to save society or achieve sexual prowess by adopting a hyper-masculine role and forcing women to submit to them. And that's what we're going to get into more when we get into Andrew Tate and the incels and all of that too. So moving on to 2009, we have the Joe Rogan Experience podcast begins to be a thing, and it was not particularly super popular during this time. Joe Rogan was a UFC announcer before. He was a comedian. He was on X Factor, Fear Factor.
Yeah.
One of those. I don't really care about him.
Exactly.
I don't really
like, I'm like, I don't
like
fucking
him.
know. I feel like
I remember around, to me, it was like 2016 to 2018 that I began to hear a lot of the men around me be like, oh, have you listened to Joe Rogan? He actually has very balanced political views. Like, he talks about the right and the left. He's in the middle. Like, you know, I would hear a lot of that stuff.
Right.
So he's not quite super popular yet, but he did start in 2009, and he talked about a wide variety of topics, including comedy, pop culture, health, fitness, conspiracy theories. And later he would get into a lot of more alpha male stuff, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then also in 2009, I just want to give a shout out to the men who are doing it right with our actual boy, sociologist Jimmy Kimmel, who published Guyland, The Perilous World.
Michael Kimmel, babe, not Jimmy Kimmel.
We could leave
Bro,
that in.
because when I saw that too, I was like, Jimmy Kimmel.
And I was the same with the Warren Ferrell. I was like, Will Ferrell? Like, Will Ferrell? Like, I'm like, bro, like, why do all these white guys have the same name?
Bro,
like, what are we doing?
I'm like, Jimmy Kimmel is so
Not
funny.
Jimmy Kimmel. I'm sorry, Jimmy.
Yeah,
no, actually, no, this guy's good, so it's fine. Michael Kimmel.
Yeah.
Maybe
Jimmy's
your
our
cousin.
boy, everyone. Yeah, got it.
Michael Kimmel is our friend. He published Guyland, The Perilous World, where boys become men, and it explored the pressures young men face to conform to traditional masculine ideals of toughness, dominance, and emotional detachment. And so he's examining toxic masculinity. He is a man. He's talking about, let's have a bigger discourse about this. But of course, MRA, men's rights activists, whatever, they don't want to engage with this. They're like, you're a feminist. You've been co-opted. You've been feminized. We're not a part of this conversation.
Right. So, and on September 13th, 2009, we have, again, the infamous Taylor Swift x Kanye West featuring Beyonce in the VMAs, this whole fucking moment where she won. Kanye West comes up on stage kind of drunk and like obliterated. What's that word? Like when you're really drunk. And was like, this should go to Beyonce. Like, what the fuck are y'all doing? Which everyone
was like, I don't mean to be interrupt, like whatever.
Right. And then she wrote the song Mean that's like about him. And like,
and then there was the whole thing with Kim Kardashian on the phone and like recording it. Yeah. But this to me, becomes a big... Go ahead.
Because I'm like, to some degree, I'm like, let's get rid of like the drunkenness or whatever. Like, to some degree, we have a black man like standing up and using his voice for a black woman, which like never happens. And like black women are calling on black men in the past and now, like, why don't y'all stick up for us? So it's like, and it's like, okay, Taylor Swift's feelings got hurt, but at the end of the day, like she's good, you know, like she still won, like it doesn't matter, like whatever. So it's like, and then it's like America's like, oh, poor white girl was like traumatized by drunk black man, which is like painting Kanye West out to be like a complete monster. I'm not saying no one's a monster, like painting him out to be like a monster as a black man, like during this time too, like it's nuanced and like I think it was important for the culture to like see. Like, I think
incredibly
it kind of
important for
needed
the
to
culture.
happen. Like
And I'd encourage you guys to go watch FD Signifier because he talks a lot more about Kanye as a person, and he is a black man.
Yeah, I
and
don't
think
really
he is
know.
much more articulate. Like, he is much more a good like spokesperson to listen to about the whole Kanye issue because, as we know, Kanye becomes very like MAGA whatever. But during
And
this time
Christ.
period, it is important to note Beyonce did not want Kanye to go up there.
Right. She had nothing to do with it.
She was like, please stop. Taylor Swift did not identify as a feminist during this time period, but this moment will be pivotal in her turning
White
to become a
feminism.
feminist.
Yeah.
And exactly, white feminism. And this is also important to note when we talk about intersectionality, the ways in which white women have weaponized their whiteness against black men quite a bit in society. Like, we didn't talk about it too much in the beginning of this episode, but that is like when it comes to like false rape accusations and all of that, a lot of it is either white women claiming black men did rape them when they in fact did not. So it's really interesting that white men are claiming that when it really should be the black men that are claiming that, honestly.
Right.
But
they want to take it as their own experience and use that.
Or it would be a white woman actually fucking a black man and her white husband or a white man being like, oh, you raped her.
Because there's
Exactly. So white women's femininity was weaponized in a lot of ways against black men. And that's why this is like an intersectional issue, because we cannot cut out men from the conversation, especially as white women. We need to talk about men's issues, because I don't have a lot about it in here about the prison industrial system, but that is something also that men's rights activists like claim to like advocate for, only on the basis that more men are locked up than women, like just on the like gender basis,
race.
Not about like the race and everything like that.
Yeah,
but
none of this is intersectional like at fucking all.
Right, like none of the men's rights activist shit is like predominantly like very, very fucking white.
Right.
But if we want to talk about like our feminism and how it should evolve, and we'll talk about it more in the next episode, like this is key stuff to
like why
pay
was it
attention
so
to.
Crazy? Like 2009, like how old was I? I was like 10
We were
or
11.
11. Like I remember that. Like it was like fucking like.
Because that's the thing, like Kanye was like, he went on, bro, Kanye used to be so cool. Like he was like, fuck George Bush for like the war and everything like that. And everyone was like, what happened to Kanye? He switched sides.
Right.
But like FD Signifier pretty much says that like Kanye was never really on anyone's side. Like he was just a little bit tapped, which is fine. But like, again, go watch FD Signifier's videos on that stuff, because I'm not the person to talk about it.
It's so layered. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to 2010 to the present. We have fourth wave feminism starts. And this is the thing, right? Because we're talking, this is fourth wave feminism. A lot of people argue that it's 2010 to present. A lot of other people have argued that we're in a different era now. Like we're almost in a fifth wave. I kind of think we
are. Yeah.
I agree as well. So maybe like throughout this episode, we can kind of try to mark where we think the wave shifted.
Ooh,
that would be interesting.
I like that.
But we also
it's
get
a
into
test, guys. Fiji loves to test.
Comment and let us know where you think the tipping point is. Like, please. And then we also get into men's rights extremism. So the feminism is growing, the men's rights.
It just keeps getting worse. Bro, it's so crazy. Worse. Like, honestly, like history, like, is, like, boring for sure. But, like, in the beginning, like, to hear about, like, the first manosphere, the first, like, men's rights, like, it's actually, like, I had no idea about any of that. Like, why would I? Like, because, like, feminism was so, like, fuck all them and, like, should it be, should it not? Like, I'm not saying what's right or wrong, but like, it's like, I just genuinely didn't know. But now that it's like, things go viral on the internet, it's like, we do know. But it's like, so yeah, anyways, yeah. Fourth wave feminism, men's rights, extremism.
Yep. So we're going to start in 2010.
Instagram hits the
App Store. And like, I forget if I have it in a different point in this timeline. Oh no.
What an iconic day.
But I'll say it now. 2010 also influencers emerge. It's when the term was first coined. And I do want to also point to this, because this, I think, is a a big marker in the manosphere as well. Women are dominating. Remember, we have mommy bloggers. They are dominating
In
the
the
blog
social
sphere,
media.
and they are monetizing what they're doing because they can monetize with like children's products, kitchen products, household
They're
products,
good
all
to
that.
look at.
Right. And then we get influencers, and women are dominating in the fashion sphere, the lifestyle sphere, all of this, and men are like hating on it a little bit. Like
They're mad. Yeah.
They're very pissed off. So we get that. And then in 2010, we also have the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which the U.S. repealed the military policy prohibiting LGBTQ plus individuals from serving.
Huge. And there was a whole episode about this in the L Word, bro. That's how I got educated, because of the L Word. It's an old TV show, if you guys don't know. But yeah, it's absolutely huge, especially like Black women, lesbians serving in the military. Like, yeah.
No, this was big. And also, like, a lot of men's rights activists want to always point, which I'm not going to lie, men in this country are seen as disposable, and a lot of the military brunt does fall on them. But women, queer people of other colors, whatever, have been trying to join the military and have not been allowed
and
to.
like,
so,
if
like,
y'all
this is a
love
landmark.
to say like how like, well, men are just different physique wise, like, then why wouldn't you go in the military? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like okay, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
I'm not going in the military, baby.
Yeah, fuck them. No, I'm good. I had met with a National Guard person in high school. I don't know what I was thinking.
Like, you were like trying to get some inspo type shit?
I was just like friends with this guy, and he had joined it, and he was like, you should talk to them. And I was like, maybe thinking about fucking him. So I was like, okay.
I'm screaming.
And I went to his grandma's house and met with the recruiter, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll pay for your college, but only if you go in state. And I wasn't going to go in state. I was going to go in Boston. So I was like, nah. Like, the only part that appealed to me is I was like, oh, I'll get to work out still. But like, yeah, I was never really feeling it.
And
anyway.
we're done. Getting to work out still. Okay. And
moving on. Yeah, we have men going their own way. So this is another group of the manosphere that breaks out, you know, with the men's rights activists and the voice for men. They believe that the society is rigged against men. They espouse the abandonment of women and sometimes of Western society. The system is impossible for them to change. So the solution is to go their own way, which to me sounds like being gay because they oppose women. But no.
What? In their logo?
Yeah, the little like meme here, they're just like, fuck women. Like,
and why are they in like bride and groom?
I don't know. Like, it doesn't make sense. But they are often paired with extreme and anti-feminism and misogyny. While MRAs, men's rights activists, technically want to change politics and the rule of law, men going their own way want to advocate abstaining from relationships with women in general. So they don't want to change anything. They just want to be like, bye.
It's giving celibacy.
It's giving 4B.
It's giving, men. Yeah, it's giving women sober.
Right.
Okay.
So the biggest and first men going their own way subreddit was created in mid-2011. And then they had smaller subreddits like Men Going Their Own Way Books, which was created in 2014. And it was the most active and popular community in the manosphere for a brief period in late 2017. So again, like, timelines are overlapping. And their key beliefs were the fuck marriage and commitment thing because they are financially and emotionally hazardous to men. Which is similar to what women say in the 4B movement. But anyway, and then they also believe society is structured to exploit men's labor and contribution, which exploit men's labor, like, I kind of see that, but like, I don't know, like, we're reaching here. Then in 2011, I just want to note Trayvon Martin is murdered by George Zimmerman, and this is also the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement. I have it later in the timeline too, because people argue about whether it was started now or later, but Trayvon Martin is murdered and a lot of attention is brought to that on social media, which again, let us know, this is a Black man that is murdered. He is a man. This is a men's rights
say
issue.
His name. Right,
say his name, and I don't see the men's rights activists hopping on this bandwagon. Anyways, we're going to move on to 2011, 2013. We have the rise of hustle culture. With the book in 2011 from Gary V, or Gary Vaynerchuk, I don't really know how to say his name. That's why everyone just says Gary V. His book, Crush It, or Crushing It, is published, promoting the idea of using social media to create a personal brand and monetize it. Guys, this sounds very, very familiar, right? And this will especially influence figures like Andrew Tate and Grant Cardone, who also emphasize hard work, entrepreneurship, and achieving financial independence. And this hustle culture was also very key to the manosphere, because when we talk about pickup artistry and how a lot of men entered the manosphere on that angle, we also have a lot of men entering the manosphere on the idea of entrepreneurship and also on the idea of fitness.
Right.
Okay, so, and also we have to remember the women are killing it.
Yeah, they're mad. I was going to say, they're mad. So they're like, all right, how do we do this?
We got to do it too. So like they're trying to keep up. So they start this whole hustle culture
bro.
situation.
They're slow. Like women didn't need a Crush It book. Like, bro.
So this is where we get the fitness and self-improvement communities coming out of the manosphere. So their focus is encouraging men to improve their physical fitness, mental health, financial stability, and social skills, ? I don't know if that's true. I think it's social skills in the context of sales, right?
Yeah.
And the key themes are gym culture, and bodybuilding, financial independence and entrepreneurship, confidence and mindset training, and positive and motivational with less focus on gender conflict. So there's just much more focus on like men and like fitness and sales and social media and
that's
hustle
all they
and
got.
grind,
right?
And girl, like all that shit. That's what
confidence and mindset training.
Yeah.
Like, no, we need to be doing some unlearning of that confidence.
Very much reminds me of the boxing gym I used to work for. Very much giving this
and all
energy.
of this just reminds me of like my ex-boyfriend too, like Joe Grogan, Andrew Tate, like even just this talk about like financial independence and like confidence and like having this like certain mindset on the world. Like that was like very much him. Like I'm like not towards me, like
culture.
He would tone it down when he was with me because like he knows how I am. But like when I would just watch him from his room, like talking to his friends, I was like, who am I with? Like what am I doing?
Observing them in the wild,
because
like,
it affects everyone. And like you said, they don't have that much. So it's like, I mean, like, yeah, okay, continue.
Like, what are we doing here? Yeah, it's very gym bro style stuff, and this will later grow into cryptocurrency and like all of that stuff as well, because we have entrepreneurship, etc.
Like even know what to say about that. Okay.
So then also in 2012 we get Andrew Tate begins his first webcam business. Bro, I'm laughing, it's not funny, but him and his brother Tristan begin their first adult webcam business, employing lingerie-clad models to engage in club sessions with men. And of course, we are very, very pro-sex work, but this is very much pimp mentality and using that hustle culture to exploit women. And in a later interview with The Mirror in March 2022, the brothers joked that their webcam ventures, which charged customers $4 an hour, are, quote, a total scam because the models featured often tell lonely male callers fake sob stories to elicit sympathy and earn larger tips, which is like, you know, sex workers have been doing this.
Yeah, I do.
Like they do this all the time, but like he is just discovering it, and we'll learn later how he is like putting himself on this shit to like to say that he is advocating for men against women. Like he is creating an audience of men to turn against women, but he is exploiting those same men while he's saying that he's for them. So it's like this paradox,
right?
You know what I'm saying,
right? Which is
and he's blaming it all on the women when he's really in charge of this business.
Right, but so it's like you know how much power women have because look at what you're
doing.
And like I feel this like really deep because I low-key feel like exploited by my ex-boyfriend, like for sure. Like, and
because
it's like
he was in this vibe.
Like he was orchestrating it. It's like that's the problem. It's like if a woman was like doing her tactics or like any sex worker to like get money, but it's like who's in charge of it? And like that's the biggest thing about media criticism is like knowing that and like
And this is a big thing, because same, like with one of my exes, like he very much wanted to pimp me and you when he met us because we were former strippers. He was like, I want to pimp both
you
these
and
bitches.
your friend. Yeah, like that's even worse, bro.
Like what, bro? But it was very much that mindset of like, okay, like porn is becoming a thing. We're for it. We're men.
Yeah,
we
were like, let's. Yeah.
But we're gonna figure out a way that we're gonna be the people that make the money off of this shit. Like, they were mad that women were like creating more of a brand for themselves in like influencers, and even with that, like one of my exes too, like he wanted to be like Kanye and style me. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, he wanted me to do the influencer shit. He wanted me to have the spotlight to gain that attention, but he wanted it to be him.
Yeah, but you styled yourself better.
Exactly. I styled myself better,
like,
bitch. I
way
always had
better,
the best
bitch.
style.
Like,
he would put me in like Nike shorts and like
right,
a big
and how
t-shirt
you
with
still
no
made
makeup.
it like look good type? I don't know, because
I mean, back then it was like giving heroin chic, where like you could wear an ugly fit, but you're skinny,
exactly.
so it looks good.
But I think like last thing, like I think like people really need to know, like me and everyone else listening, like, and what you just said is so important. It's like simultaneously, like Andrew Tate is like exploiting women, telling all these men to hate women. They are the reason you're so miserable. And then at the same time, profiting off of men's misery for himself. So it's like, it's like what? Like men are just so easily fooled. I don't know.
Oh my God, like what?
Like, how do you guys not know? He doesn't like you either.
That their biggest metaphor is the red pill. Like, take the red pill and you'll know the truth.
I'm like, you guys are ruining
they're
it.
Missing the entire truth.
Like
it
you
is
don't know the
insane.
truth. Yeah.
Like you're so stupid. But anyway.
So simultaneously during the same time as all of this, from 2010 to 2014, we have girl boss and corporate feminism beginning. And this, again, was very white feminist. It's like, we have jobs, like we're working too. Like and it's like girl bossing throughout the day. Like you still hear like girl boss, honestly, like in the 2020s. Like that one is like definitely lived on like pretty hard. But yeah, it just makes me think of like Barbie, you can be anything. Like it's all like white
and hustle
centered
culture too.
And hustle, yeah, it's interesting how it's like the same exact thing. Yeah, it's like men and women are like kind of piggybacking off of each other and competing. Yeah. So some influential books during this time and that kind of like coined this whole thing. So we have Leandra Medine Cohen, who starts Man Repeller blog in 2010 and then also writes a book in 2013. In 2011, we have Sophia Amoruso, who is the founder of Nasty Gal, which created the Girl Boss brand, which later becomes the title of like her best-selling book. Like the Girl Boss shit definitely took the fuck off. Like white women ate that up. And me included at the time, like I wasn't mad about it. Like this,
same.
like back in like 2010, I mean, it's like obviously I was younger, but like I wasn't like thinking critically about feminism as much. So like I saw like Girl Boss was like cool, like girl power, like we got it going on, like whatever.
Like, we can be equal as men. We can be entrepreneurs, like all of that stuff.
And so
and
the
it was
idea,
fashion influence too, because Nasty Gal, and Man Repeller was fashion, like a fashion blog too, essentially. So yeah.
So it's like, yeah, women really latched onto it. White women specifically more than anything. And then she essentially writes a memoir as well, Sophia. And the girl boss movement just continued to expand, and like a bunch of influencers and like people online, like it was like trending now. It's not just like her doing it, writing these books. Like people are taking that identity on at their own and like putting that into their feminism, like adopting the term and lifestyle, because it is like a lifestyle is how they advertise
Wake up at 5 a.m., green smoothie. Yep.
And again, it was a lot of like young women that like aspire to like have big dreams and like have a really good job. Like it appealed to that demographic, like women in college, things like that. So then we have Lean In, Women, Work, and the Will to Lead, which was a book in 2013 encouraging women to assert themselves at work, not only at work, but also at home. And it was co-written by business executive Sheryl Sandberg.
And she was from Facebook. So it was another like top dominating platform at the time. She's like, I'm a woman. I'm at this top company. You can do it, blah, blah, blah.
And also, we have Whitney Wolfe Herd launches Bumble in 2014. And we have done an episode like on Whitney Wolfe Herd and all of those controversies and like she's still being controversial like literally today. Yeah, with the celibacy thing. And it's like, is Bumble really for women or not? But like that was the beginning of that. And then also Kim K and the rest of the gang, like Kylie, all them bitches, like they started launching a lot of businesses. So it's like looking at Kylie Jenner, oh my God, like she's the first billionaire at this age or whatever. And like why it appeals to young women because she was already famous, guys. Like they got Kardashian money, like, so, but yeah, she fully like represented that for a lot of people too.
Yeah. Yeah. And Sophia Amoruso the most was more of like the, like, I guess you could say rags to riches story. Not really, because she started selling clothes online and then became like big. But I think her family low-key had money, like whatever. But this is also where you start to see like the corporate influences come in, right? Because it's good for Facebook to position Sheryl Sandberg as this like top leader in this like feminist movement. It's good for their corporate mission. It's also good for capitalism, commercialism.
I was just about to say, like, girl boss is very much capitalism.
It's like a marketing technique, like all
like,
of that
now
stuff.
It's like taken off. It's like, I'm gonna girl boss the day, like if I'm feeling depressed, like whatever. But like back then it's like it really was exclusively like about work, like hence like girl boss. Like it's like women getting in bigger positions, which again is not a bad thing, but it was like extremely whitewashed and just like a new branch of like white women feminism. Yeah. Fully, not to an extent, literally fully. And then in 2012, we have the Steubenville rape case. So if you guys don't know, the Steubenville high school rape case brought national attention to how rape culture was perpetuated by the internet and social media. So basically what happened, 2 high school football players were convicted of raping a 16-year-old girl, and people essentially saw it and it was witnessed, and people were able to share actual images of the assault, and like people were laughing about it. And this case helped highlight the ways in which rape culture is normalized and enabled, particularly among young people and within certain social circles. So like obviously like rape culture on college campuses like is still a big conversation today, but I'm guessing like this was kind of the first time that there was a case that was like nationally broadcasted to, and where people like started kind of paying attention to like how serious that issue was. Like not everyone, obviously a lot of people were laughing and saying it's no big deal, but this was influential for what it is.
Yeah, especially with social media. It's like people caught wind of it, and then, you know, social media activism began to be a thing. Yeah.
And now some people's activism is only on social media.
Right, yeah.
Sorry. Me included. Like, I've been guilty to that shit too. So I'm just saying. Just making a quick joke. So then we have the rise of men are trash. And let me tell you, this was my era, guys. Like, if there's any one of these eras, like, girl boss was like, yeah, it's cute, we're wearing pink. But, like, men are trash. Like, I fully was, like, the like, leader of the movement, bro. Like, and I'm not proud of it. But, like, this is, like, when I remember, like, this era, I was like, okay. Like, yes, people stereotype feminists as, like, hating men. But, like, now we're saying that we actually do. And like it feels good because we have a lot of rage. But again, it's very white-centric, problematic. We need to include men, not hate them, etc. But this was a big deal in our culture, and we'll put this little image on the screen. I think it's so cute. I love this. Like, honestly, this would be a cute tattoo, like back in 2012. Like, you know what I mean?
People probably got it, bro, too.
But there is some questioning about when exactly did this happen. Was it 2012? Was it 2015? Was it 2016? Right. Like, when did it fully take off? We're not so sure. And it was everywhere on Twitter, Instagram, all of these social media platforms. And it was assumed to have been created from these high profile rape cases on college campuses, like the one we just mentioned, kind of like cause and effect sort of thing. Like, I do think like men are trash did serve a purpose in the extent with like validating like women's anger, like because like all like people deserve to like be angry and like have that. But and it's just like we're still in that era. Like I don't feel like this is like 2012. Like I feel like this is like right now, and like because it looks like 4B and voiceover, it's like it still is men are trash. Like we literally have a video of us in college in the mirror, and we're men are trash. We're like, like it was
men are trash. No, bro, like we were the biggest proponents.
We were
and, like,
the leaders.
There is
bro.
like another later in this outline. There's a resurgence of the men are trash like movement, kind of. But it is like when you think about it, like it's almost like I feel like and just like this is so corny, but I feel like it should have been like men are like recycling. Like we can like make them better, like you know what I'm saying? Because it's like I like the statement that like men are trash, like it was feeding to the fire of what we're getting to next, which is
back
the
then
incels.
I loved that though. I think people liked feeding to the fire
because
you
they
want
wanted
us
to
to
be
hate
like,
you, fine.
Exactly. They were like toxic masculinity, all of it needs to be burnt the fuck down, it's all trash, throw it out, let's rebuild it. But during this time, men were like, what the literal fuck is going on? I'm not trash. I'm not like these rapists. I'm not whatever. So while we're all saying this, we lost some men in the movement. And I'm not like blaming feminists for everything, but like I'm also saying like we got to look at things intersectionally. So we're going to get to the incels.
Okay, great.
Okay.
My least favorite.
So the red pill community starts to emerge. And as we said, the red pill community really took off with a voice for men. But the incels really grasp onto this red pill ideology. And so incel was actually first created by Elena's Involuntary Celibacy Project. So once again, we have a woman creating something that men co-opt and turn into being some misogynistic shit. But she created this in 1997 for a Canadian university. And she was discussing her own sexual inactivity with others, and she essentially created this site with people of all genders, all sexual orientations, to share thoughts and experiences about how like lonely they were and how they really craved this intimate connection. And even in 1997 she had a mailing list for the topic. And then around 2000, and guys, I know I'm jumping timelines, but this is just background on like the peak of incels.
I mean,
right?
it's like impossible to like
do like I can't bring it down to every single thing, right? But around 2000, she gave the site to a stranger. She gave it up. She moved on with her life. She came out as bisexual. Like, she developed her life more. Right. And then the message board Love Shy was founded in 2003, which also became a home for a lot of involuntarily celibate people of all genders, which is really cute when you think about it. Like, they were just like love shy. Like, again, like the pickup artists, like they wanted like love, connection. They couldn't really find it. Like, it was a community for them to meet and talk about their issues.
Okay.
But it morphed, and she kind of said, I don't have the quote in here, but she says now she feels like a mad scientist in a way that like created this thing that like became so out of her control, and she would have never expected it to develop into the hate that it has.
Yeah,
like
I
it
think
literally
you've told me this before.
Yeah,
like we've talked about
it, and maybe the male loneliness epidemic episode or something like that. Gender wars.
I hope she finds a way to like lose that burden from her. It is not her fault.
Like, it's not her fault. It's grown out of her control. But this group of incels is mostly young men united by a strong feeling of rejection and rage towards the opposite sex. So they rose to the mainstream due to their association with mass murderers, which we're going to get to in a minute.
Bro.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
Yeah, the community is obsessed with theories about looks and relationships. This is also where we get looks maxing, which is trending on TikTok currently. So this is also how you see these like some manosphere communities are like penetrating the predominant culture. And even like people who aren't involved in the incel community will say things like, oh my God, he's such a Chad. Like, oh my God, like I need to looks max this year. Like they'll like be making fun of it, or, oh, he's such an alpha. Like even that is part of like incel culture, but like it's evolved because they are super online. So they often also desire to hurt themselves or others. There's like very high suicide rates as well, which is kind of sad.
Right.
But the first incel, bro, it's like, this is sad. Like it's really sad because in a lot of ways, like I find like myself feeling bad for them, but then I look at like all the evil people that have come out of it, and I'm like, I can't feel bad for them. But at the same time, there's a lot of like, again, like the pickup artist stuff, like victimize people in these groups. So it's weird. This is very, very complex. But the first incel subreddit was called Forever Alone. And it dates back to 2010. And the community picked up real momentum mid-2016. And then the subreddit incels was banned in November of 2017, but then they became active again in 2018. So they also believe in the black pill idea. So there's the red pill, there's a blue pill, there's also the black pill. So someone who has taken the black pill has adopted the belief that they are hopeless and that their lack of success romantically and sexually is permanent, regardless of any changes they might make to their physical appearance, sexuality, or other characteristics. So like essentially there's no hope for them like at all. And they blame all of their like sexlessness, lovelessness like on women. They believe women have the power. They don't have any of the power. They're oppressed, all this sort of stuff. They believe women also owe them sex, which is how we also get a lot of like rape culture and like murder and stuff like that too. So they point to Mark Lepine and Sung Hui Chow as some of their early like godfathers. And then they also have George Sodini, who was the perpetrator of the 2009 Collier Township shooting. And then we have the biggest one in 2014, and this is what really like rockets incels into like mainstream culture, like what makes them known. Elliot Rodger is the perpetrator of the 2014 Isla Vista killings, and he killed 6 people and injured 14 others using knives, semi-automatic pistols, and a car near the University of California, Santa Barbara. And he first killed his 2 roommates and then their friend in the apartment they shared. And he drove to a sorority house where he intended to murder its occupants, but was unable to enter the premises. He shot at 3 women outside the sorority house, killing 2. He later drove nearby and shot and killed a man as well. So, and then you have more from there. You have Alex Minason, the perpetrator of the 2018 Toronto attack. And there's others too. But Elliot Rodger is the biggest one. And he is frequently referenced in these subreddit groups, in these incel groups. Referred to being the incel saint, with memes of his face superimposed onto paintings of Christian icons. So like it is getting very, very culty. But yeah, post the murders that Elliot Rodgers committed, and there is some discrepancy because people say that it was the rape cases. People also say it was Elliot Rodgers. We're not quite sure. Same with Men Are Trash. But we have the emergence of yes, all women and not all men hashtags on Instagram and Twitter as well. And this is iffy, right? Because some people say that the hashtag not all men started as men's kind of activism response to what had happened, being like, not all men do this. Like, we need to not be like those men. And then women created the hashtag after as like, yeah, but yes, all women experience this violence. And some people reverse it as, yes, all women experience violence, and then the hashtag not all men. So it's kind of like you know how there was Black Lives Matter and then Blue Lives Matter was created like in opposition. This and one is all like lives matter, right? And all lives, exactly. So it's like this is like it's like they don't. Black Lives Matter definitely came first, but this one it's like which one came first? Like
they're not really sure.
Pin it down because it was so close at the same time.
Yeah, because it's like when I think of not all men, like I almost think of like a bad feminist that like, and this, I'm not saying this is right, but like a bad feminist that like I don't like. That's like not all men do this, guys. Like right. Let's not hate men.
Saying like, oh, like yeah, that happened, but not all men. Don't group all men into the category, even though we're trying to have a bigger conversation about rape culture,
right? But saying like hashtag not all men in sense of like there's men that love you, women, and respect you and support you. It's like that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's like I don't think about it like that at all.
Right? It's still like the hashtag doesn't put the best like taste in my mouth
because
they
it's like okay,
that's what you come out of it with is like, oh, like it's kind of like white women with the blue friendship bracelets. Like we're not the problem though. Like you know what I'm saying?
It's like but it's not about you individually.
Exactly. It's about like maybe you should talk to these men and like create
Yeah,
something to
like
fix
it
this.
is you though, like because it's happening, like it's a group project.
It's a group project, like figure this shit out. So that happens. So during this time as well, we also see a surge in digital and pop culture feminism, which we already started to see with all the hashtags, hashtag yes all women, hashtag not all men, men are trash, like all of that stuff. And then in 2013, we also get the hashtag real men don't rape, which is, again, like maybe related to the rape cases. Like if the timeline is iffy on these things, it's kind of hard to track. But we also, in 2014, April, we get the hashtag bring back our girls. And this started in Nigeria. There was a kidnapping of mostly Christian female students, 276 female Christian students and Muslim students kidnapped by the Islamic terrorist group called Boko Haram. And this started in Nigeria. A woman created the hashtag and then it spread to America. And we had a ton of celebrities like holding up pieces of paper that said like hashtag bring back our girls. So this is kind of where we begin to see performative activism becoming a thing, because I don't really know what them holding up the sign of the hashtag is really doing. Like I'm not really convinced. And this is also a moment that the men's rights activist group or movement points to as an example of sexism, right? Because apparently this terrorist group was attacking all students, but it only got picked up by the media when it was girls, and that they claim that the media tried to warp it as that this terrorist group was attacking girls' education, but they weren't. And that I can confirm, they weren't really attacking girls' education. They were just doing a whole bunch of different types of terrorism. It wasn't necessarily like gender violence. And so like the men's rights activists claim that, you know, people only start to care when it's young girls and they're like being affected by education. Like, I don't know. Like to me, it's kind of just like, okay, like the whole situation is bad. And is it very much giving performative activism and early digital activism that's not really doing much? Yes. And should the attention have been brought to it sooner? Yes, probably. But like, again, what do we fucking do? So that happens. And then we also have the Free the Nipple campaign begins in 2013. I was a big proponent of this, guys. I still to this day be posting see-through shirts. My shirt is see-through right now.
I know.
I
I
see it because
like
my
at
hair,
one point
like
in
my
my Tumblr bio and my Tumblr handle, like my name on Tumblr in the era when I was like finding girlfriends on Tumblr was literally nipple confidence, and it was like a big deal to people in my school. They were like, "What the fuck is
like,
that?"
You're so
like they thought I was literally tapped, and I was, but also
because it was like very new and same. Like I was early on that movement. I was like, it's my body. Like I can wear like whatever I want. Like I wanted to be like that. My family was like not fucking with it. I was like 12. No, I was 15 at the time. We were 15.
12, yeah.
In 2013. So, and Rihanna was a big proponent of this. I think it is funny to consider that later in life, Rihanna was asked about like what fashion moments she regrets. And she said like showing her nipples, which I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, but this was, you can see there was the Free the Nipple group right here where you do have a black woman in the front with a bunch of white women behind her. And then you have the white woman in this other picture. And it was a very like festival movement. I would say it was like a lot of white women kind of pushing this. It was black, like spiritual women as well. But like it was a very kind of like white dominated movement. And then we also get in 2013, the body positivity and F your beauty standards begin to be part of the feminist conversation. People are kind of like rebelling against cultural beauty standards because of Instagram and all of this stuff. And Tess Holliday was one of the biggest proponents of like diverse body types and showing that in the media. And since then, there's been like a heightened pressure on this movement. We moved back to like body neutrality. Like we went back and forth. It seems like skinniness is having a fucking resurgence right now. But like this image that I'm going to show on the screen, this was like everywhere.
I know.
Like every
I ate it
campaign
up. I loved it.
Same. I loved it as well. I was like, yes, like body positivity. Like it was important. It was good for the time. But, you know, it was like very important and crucial for the time to move body standard like movements in feminism, like inclusive feminism forward, but it was also very corporate dominated, capitalism dominated, encouraged to like sell you things. Like a lot of brands would hop on this bandwagon because they were just trying to sell
And we
more
still
clothes.
see that. And then they get rid of them like a year later, and then they're nowhere to be found. Yeah,
exactly. So then in 2014, this is where we really get a big moment in mainstream feminism, pop culture, digital feminism. She had released her Flawless album, and she made an iconic feminist performance during the 2014 MTV VMAs, Video Music Awards. And in this performance, she played a bunch of songs, but she had the word feminist behind her, as you guys can see in this image. And
so iconic.
And she included a sample from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk titled "We Should All Be Feminists." And we will read a little bit of that TED Talk that was included in the song.
It's like, it's so hard to read because I know exactly how it sounds in the song.
Get it at the ground.
But this was iconic, and like, I will say I did like a project in like my English lit class for missing voices, and like I like played this for the class. This was like everything. Okay. We teach girls to shrink themselves, to make themselves smaller. We say to girls, you can have ambition, but not too much. You can aim to be successful, but not too successful. Otherwise, you will threaten the man. Because I am female, I am expected to aspire to marriage. I am expected to make my life choices, always keeping in mind that marriage is the most important. Now, marriage can be a source of joy and love and mutual support. But why do we teach girls to aspire to marriage and we don't teach boys the same? We raise girls to see each other as competitors, not for jobs or for accomplishments, which I think can be a good thing, but for the attention of men. We teach girls that they cannot be sexual beings in the way that boys are. Feminist, a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes.
Right. So like, again, she defines feminist, a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes, like the equality, right? But a lot of people on the manosphere side of things claim that like, oh, people don't really like, they don't believe that. They just believe in women's power. And like, they say that this just pushed it into the mainstream media. And like, I do think that this moment was huge and incredibly important for feminism to get into the mainstream consciousness. And Beyonce is such a huge star, and let alone it be not just Beyonce, but a Black woman feminist. Words were so important.
Right.
But at the same time, we also do have to acknowledge, and I've seen a lot of like Black feminist YouTubers criticize this to like a degree as well, like the ways in which it's like performative to like an extent, like it's bringing awareness, but what is it like completely like driving it to kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who were fans of Beyonce who just loved the album, who were like, oh my God, of course I identify as a feminist because I'm part of the Beehive, or I listen to the top 40 or whatever, and they don't really know what it means. So this like catapults feminism to mainstream media and defines it as like women's empowerment coming off of like the girl boss era, all of those things. So like overall net good. But when we look at like the feminist movement as a whole and stuff like that, the ways in which feminism, our idea of what feminism is, begins to become a little bit more confusing.
Yeah.
This can be pointed to as one of the reasons
you're thinking
why.
more critically. Yeah.
Yeah. And then around this time, we also get Taylor Swift begins to identify as a feminist, which is big because before an interview, she was asked if she did. And she was like, no, like I don't really, whatever. But now with the pressure from Beyonce and other stars, she begins to identify as a feminist,
like,
and we see it become a trend as white feminism. And she will harp on this. And, you know, like she does experience sexism in the media because of her different relationships with men.
Right.
And like slut shaming and like all of that. Like I don't want to minimize that. Like she definitely does experience sexism. But she also does position herself or compare herself to like Black women and like do this weird thing that we see her do with like Nicki Minaj and like all that stuff. So like it again, it's like a little bit iffy. But then moving into September of 2014, this is big, okay? These are like two of the biggest moments for feminism in pop culture. And this is where we start to see celebrity become a really big thing in feminism. Emma Watson delivers a speech on gender equality at the United Nations, launching the hashtag #HeForShe campaign. Okay. And this is important, the way that it's said, because this is, again, more men's criticism of the feminist movement, because they're like, we're sick of being us for you. When are you going to be for us, or when are you going to be for equality? Which is like, again, like, sit down and shut the fuck up. Like,
right.
You have had the power for so long. When have you ever been like, bring us along? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's very,
It's like fucking relax,
warped.
but like, exactly. Like, we're not looking at the whole picture. But in this speech, she essentially calls for men to stand up for gender equality. And she makes a critical intersection of feminist activism with global diplomacy and male allyship. So she is really, really focusing on, she talks about her experience in the industry, being like an actress, and the sexism that she faced. And she really pushes on, again, what Beyonce and her song like pushes as well, is like the equality of the sexes. Feminism is the equality of the sexes. They're trying to rebrand it as we're not just man haters. We love men too. Like, this is what we're trying to do.
Right.
Because there was pushback after men are trash and like all of that stuff. And then she like addresses misconceptions about feminism being anti-men. She calls on men to take responsibility for dismantling the patriarchy alongside of women. She highlights the mutual benefit of gender equality for both men and women. And this campaign went super, super viral, gaining millions of commitments from men and boys worldwide. And she said that, you know, gender equality is not just a women's issue, it's a human's rights issue. And men should participate actively in ending discrimination, violence, and inequality. And it was like kind of like her formal invitation to men. It was like, feminists as a collective, as a whole, globally, we are inviting you to join this movement like right now.
Right.
And some of the criticisms of this campaign, because of course there were that it prioritized the experiences of white Western women over women of color, LGBTQ plus individuals, and non-Western communities. And then some feminists also felt like the campaign centered too much around males' participation. They were like, why are we focusing on like he for she? Like, why aren't we focusing on pushing women's rights forward instead of like pausing to try to get men to join the conversation? Which it's like, I see, but like, again, like, this is also the predominant feminist narrative of like not really including men. Like, let's do this on our own. Like, we don't really need them.
Yeah.
When I do think their support is needed.
I think we definitely need them. I think we really need them.
Like, more than like ever. Like,
honestly,
actually.
like, yeah, like, I don't, like, the first criticism, of course, like, I agree with, like, with the, you know, not including queer people, BIPOC people, communities. And then, but the second part, I'm like, I disagree with that. You know, I think we really do need them. And I think we should be calling on them.
And people were saying that it's like, okay, like, women have made all this progress. Men are mad. But like, why are we going to like, you know, take a step back to like try to include them in all of that stuff? And like, to a point, I agree, because like a lot of these men are misguided and they're missing the point and they're not thinking critically and like all of that stuff. But as we talked about in our white women who voted for Trump episode, in our white liberal women episode, like, the pedagogy of the oppressed, men don't realize anytime another group gets more power or more rights, not even power, they feel like they are being oppressed. So I think there is a certain level to which we have to explain it to them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So there's some like arguments among the feminist community during this period. And then in 2014 as well, the Department of Justice under President Obama also issued guidance to public schools for the rights of transgender students to use facilities that aligned with their gender identity based on Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, which prohibits sex-based discrimination. So like, this is where we begin the bathroom debate, which we're going to get into a little bit more later, which is, of course, a gender issue as well, on the intersex of like queer identity, gender, etc. 2014 is also a big year because we have the Ferguson protests. And this is where a lot of people attribute the Black Lives Matter movement to beginning, even though some people say it's with Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
But the hashtag Black Lives Matter is risen in popularity. But Michael Brown was shot in Ferguson, Missouri, which led to the nationwide protests, and the Black Lives Matter movement becomes like a prominent thing in culture. There was also the Charleston church shooting of 9 Black churchgoers by a white supremacist, which reignited conversations about race and also the use of the Confederate flag and Confederate statues. And then in 2014, 2015, we also get Gamergate, which I'm not going to talk about too much because it is like extremely confusing to me as someone who's not really like on that side of things. We did talk about it in our last Gender Wars episode, but essentially there was a lot of like hate and misogyny going on online forums in the like gaming community against like women. And there was like a breakup between these two like streamers, and it like, but it is said to have started what led to a lot of like men hating feminists and like joining incels and like all of that. And there's so many YouTube videos about Gamergate, guys. If you want to learn more, there's definitely more. And then in 2015, same-sex marriage is legalized in the United States, which is so crazy. That's only like, we're about to be in 2025. That's only like 10 years, like not even 10 years ago.
Damn near less. Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
that
I remember
like,
that day. There was a party in my house. That's for sure. That shit was crazy. Yep.
Yeah. So we can start to see, like, as we start to see these things happening, the men are like festering and bubbles are rising, right? They're not happy about this
and
stuff.
It's like, this is about to be, this is like pre-2016, like, yeah. So
pre-Trump. Yep.
But it's like, makes sense why it's coming, like with, I don't know.
It's all festering. It's all coming up. It's building. Because the Beyonce and the Emma Watson stuff didn't stop. Like, that's continuing to going on. Like, that is like a big, like, brands like H&M, like Old Navy, they're all jumping on the like woman power feminist bandwagon. The predominant culture is that people are celebrating. Not all brands are celebrating the legalization of gay marriage, but like it is becoming more mainstream, as like something to be like, you know, to celebrate. And then in 2015, Caitlyn Jenner. That is so funny, bro. Caitlyn Jenner transitioned. She comes out as trans, bringing trans issues to the mainstream.
Right,
we all
know
she went
it's a Kardashian,
conservative. Right,
so everybody
it has to be a
pay
Kardashian.
Attention. Yeah,
but this makes it a huge conversation. She was also like named one of the women of the year for like 1 year, and then people were pissed about that among like feminist communities and also like men's rights communities. I forget which year that was, but whatever. And then also in 2015, we get the bathroom bill debate begins with North Carolina's HB 2. That was in 2016, sorry, but the bathroom bills like begin in 2015, which is like, which bathroom? Shut the fuck up. Everybody, please shut the fuck up.
And then in 2015, we have the Hunting Ground documentary and the campus rape crisis. My mom like directly works in this stuff. Like during this time, she was traveling around the world to different college campuses, and she also met with Major League Baseball players, like literally like the Red Sox, like my mom's that girl, and was like educating them on this exact thing. And like I've watched this film. It's like, you know, the hunting ground, like it's really scary, like it's terrifying, but it essentially like has like hundreds of cases of like sexual assault on college campuses. And it was on Netflix. Like Netflix was, I'm pretty sure, like this was like, it was everywhere, and it was really popular. And, you know, focusing on rape culture in academic settings specifically, and also the lack of accountability, because not only is there so much rape happening and assault happening on college campuses, nothing is being done about it. People are getting kicked out of school because they said something and they protest at their college. Like, it was like, not only is it happening, but no one's supporting these people that are assaulted
and getting justice.
And the people that are raping are still playing on the football team, on the baseball team. They still have A's in all their classes. And meanwhile, the other person, like the person that was assaulted, was like kicked out of school, like a lot of the times for even just saying something, or again, having a protest and things like that. So yeah, just highlighting the systemic failures of institutions, academic institutions, to support survivors.
Yeah, and this is even more the reason why a lot of people, like with the men's rights activists and all of that stuff, it's like, please, like, shut the fuck up, because it's like there was not even a system in place to properly address issues of sexual misconduct, domestic violence, rape, all of that stuff on campus. Like, so for them to say it's false when half the time women aren't believed in general was kind of like, okay, like, what are we doing here? Like, we are focused on a microscopic part of the issue.
Yeah.
Which, again, like, at this point in time, like today and throughout the whole movement, do I wish that we had included men in the conversation about sexual abuse and domestic abuse and all of that too? Because also when I was like in rehab, like I did realize there were a lot of men there who were either older or younger that had been sexually abused by their families or been abused. And I was like, oh my God, like it was like a wake up call for me in a way, because like I've dated men, I've known men in the past who have been abused, but like just being in that environment, like and seeing how many and like the diverse different types, like it is an issue for men as well.
It kind of
like,
aligned you with them in more of a way.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm like, okay, like I like get it, and and not just straight men, like gay men too. Like you know, like it's all people, it's all genders that this face is disproportionately
and
like
that's
women.
What Me Too was supposed to be about everyone, and I know we haven't gotten there yet, but
but we're coming up on it.
Yeah.
So 2015, the red pill philosophy grows even more. We're at an all-time high. Again, we've already talked about this. They think feminism disadvantages men, blah, 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 blah. But like with all this feminist talk, they're just getting more and more angry. They think women have more power.
And the black pill is even crazier, honestly.
Yeah, the black pill is insane.
And then April 12th, 2015, we have the Trump versus Hillary Clinton situation. Obviously this was a big deal. It was the first time, like, what's it called? Like pre-president, like not a nominee.
Yeah, well, it's the launch of the campaign. So they weren't like deep into it yet, but they like announced that they were like running and everything.
Right. Like,
and no one took Trump seriously, honestly.
I know. I was thinking about that the other day, how like everyone thought it was a joke and like little did we know. Anyways. So yeah, almost immediately, like a bunch of online forums like Reddit and Twitter were filled with comments about her appearance, age, her voice, and just, you know, tearing her apart as a woman rather than her policies or qualifications. And then this is where grab them by the pussy happened, when Trump was recorded making that horrible statement to one of his friends, Billy Bush. And the tape surfaced in October of 2016, obviously sparking widespread criticism, outrage, tears. I mean, it was horrible.
It was everything, yeah. And that brings us into the Me Too movement, which we're really close to getting into. But yeah, whole bunch of sexism. Hillary Clinton was very much giving girl boss. She experienced misogyny also from women, though. Women blamed her for staying with Bill Clinton when he cheated and like all of that. So it was like
she
on
talked
both
down
sides.
on like blue collar families
She
and a
talked
bunch of
down
women.
on and
I
we
learned
talked about that in the Trump episode. Yeah, so that was like, yeah, it was whatever. But we really did not expect her to lose. And Donald Trump was elected. I cried.
Yeah, that was.
We were at Emerson. We protested the next day.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
it's crazy
it was
that we were in college in
year.
2016. We're so old. But
bro, like,
yeah, that
time.
was to be in a space like Emerson that was very like social justice oriented, and Emerson was accepting to a point. We don't have the time to get into logistics, but like it was like an echo chamber of like depression when that happened. So yeah,
classes were canceled. Like it was intense,
which is good. A lot of people didn't get that. So yeah.
But also in 2016, we also, I do want to know, okay, I'm marking this moment, even though this is not the key moment, but to me in my heart and what I pay attention to, it is the key moment, because Young Thug, guys, if you know me, you know I love Young Thug, like free Young Thug. He's out. I know he did a lot of bad things. I don't give a fuck. I still love him. Not condoning the things that he did. But in 2016, he wore a dress on the cover of his mixtape Jeffrey.
Yeah.
And this was huge because I mean, I wasn't living in Atlanta at the time, but like if you're from Atlanta, everyone in Atlanta goes hard for Young Thug, like YSL, Slime, like he is a gangbanger, like he is a drug dealer, like he is like very like rap masculinity, whatever, but he was one of the first people. I think Lil Uzi too, but like Lil Uzi's a little bit different because he's not really like that, but like he was beginning to break down what masculinity and specifically Black masculinity looks like.
Which is so important.
Style, which is so important, but he is not the only one.
Yep.
I want to acknowledge that back in the 90s, Kurt Cobain would wear dresses, which was the beginning of this movement. In 2011, Marc Jacobs launched skirts for men, and he would often wear skirts on red carpets. In 2013, we actually have Kanye West wearing a leather kilt. 2015, Jaden Smith would wear skirts. 2018, we have Ezra Miller in avant-garde outfits. 2019, Billy Porter, of course, at the Oscars. He wore a custom tuxedo gown. And then we have Harry Styles later in 2019 in Gucci campaigns and on his Vogue cover in 2020 and 2021. Kid Cudi wore a dress on SNL. 2022, we have Lil Nas's red carpet look. And then we have Bad Bunny's general gender fluid fashion in 2023. So throughout this time period, even though we have a lot of like celebration of like toxic masculinity and like hardcore masculine standards, there is a like pushback, kind of like the metrosexual snag guy kind of thing going on. And I honestly, like, besides Kurt Cobain in the 90s with like his dress and everything, but a lot of these rappers do attribute a lot of like style influences to Kurt Cobain. Like, for some reason, I think it's because like he was very against racism. He was very for feminism. He was very forward thinking for his time.
Yeah.
But a lot of artists like Kanye, Young Thug, whatever, point to Kurt Cobain, and Black men, I think specifically, are leading the charge on like experimenting with their style, with their fashion. We have Playboy Cardi as well, who I didn't include in this timeline. But when I think about style today for men, and specifically like the men in the groups that I hang around, like alternative men, most of them have their nails painted. They have like little accessories on. They'll wear a skirt. Like, it is very gender fluid, a lot more than it used to be. Like, it's weird because we've had the resurgence of like hyper masculinity, but also like more and more, I think women find the softer masculinity and the like feminine aspects of masculinity like really sexy. Like, I know me personally, I don't. And we have Timothy Chalamet too.
Yeah,
I didn't include him, but he was like a moment for the soft boy.
Yeah, I know. They're
aesthetic.
definitely. It's crazy how like two things can be true at once. Like, and it's like everything's to the extreme. It's like we have soft boys and we have extreme, but it's like we also have so many people in the middle that like dilly dally and both.
Right.
Like, but yeah, it's the parallel and like the I don't know, big words. Yeah. Anyway.
But yeah, and this is also like can play into some of the arguments, especially with the white men, because I feel like the white men don't always pay attention to Black men as much, like the conservative white men on the manosphere side.
Oh my God.
But they will point to some of these people like Harry Styles and be like, this is what's wrong with men today. They're becoming feminine, just like they said in the 90s and everything else. There's always this moral
end
panic.
The world to their knowledge.
Exactly. Like, what is their... Yeah, exactly. So next in 2016, we have the big year. This is a huge year, guys.
It's getting scarier. Like,
it's getting intense. We have the 2016 documentary, The Red Pill. And both Autumn and I watched this. I don't want to harp on it too much because I kind of talked about the ideologies like throughout this episode.
We will more in the part 2.
Yeah, we will more in part 2 and like honestly in future episodes after having watched it. But she talked to Paul Elam, she talked to Warren Farrell, and she went into this documentary being a feminist. She had previously done documentaries on purity balls, like women's reproductive rights, like
which
all
we
this
just
stuff.
covered too. When I saw that, I was like, bro, these damn purity balls are following me
everywhere. Like, what the fuck? But yeah, so she was like looking for something new. And she went into this stuff and she didn't expect herself to agree with them, but she sympathized with them. And by the end of the documentary, she said that she no longer identified as a feminist. And she it's weird because she started to align herself more with advocating for men's rights, but she still wanted to align with advocating for women's rights. But every single prominent feminist and feminist that she had ties to that was promoting her work pre the Red Pill cut ties with her. Like, she was completely like smeared in every like major publication. They were all like, why are you doing this? Why are you empathizing with them? Like, this is fucked up, da 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 da. And like, I don't know, because it's weird like looking back in hindsight, right? Like, the time period and what was going on. And like,
I know.
To a degree, like the arguments were that she was too sympathetic or empathetic of their issues, because there were some really bad things that they had that they were posting on the blog. What was it? A man's voice.
A
voice for men.
Voice for,
about like rape. Yeah, about like rape culture and like a lot of that stuff. And they said their words were twisted, like whatever. But there was a lot of like bad things that were being posted like during that time. So people were like, oh, how dare you empathize with these people that are actually very like violent. But the thing is that not all of them are violent.
Yeah.
And it's like we're grouping a whole it's very like, because again, they talk about like circumcision, men's reproductive rights, domestic violence, rape, the military, workplace fatalities, male suicides. Like, because watching the documentary, there were some stats where it's like you watch it and you're like, holy shit, like this is like sad. Like I never thought of this.
And I do think like, so like again, it's like everyone's mad because it's like we don't want to center men like in this whole situation. But I do think like her choosing to do this like wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Like whether she was being over empathizing or not, like I do think kind of misses the point, because my thing is like, maybe it's like we do need to play a game to an extent. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like when I was a stripper, here I am connecting it. And I would like have some like Trump supporter clients, like for real. But they had money. Like I was like, sorry, like I don't know what to do. So I would like be nice to them and like try to understand. And like they would actually like spill some crazy tea about why. And then kind of get to the bottom of it. And so I'm like, I don't really know if that's the worst thing. Like, I do think this needed to be a moment.
Yeah, it builds bridges.
But
exactly.
Like, it's entrenched with the men are trash era in like 2016. So it's like, I wonder if this came out now and like, I don't know, like we're still pre
now
too.
We're still in Boy Sober and 4B. So it's like, there has always been, and since like probably Men Are Trash, the predominant culture, which we need to acknowledge and we'll talk about in our next episode as well, like, and we talked about in the liberal white women episode, is like, we are like blaming men, we're hating men, like we're so much that we're ignoring the fact that some of these issues are valid and we do need to acknowledge them. And like the thing about the red pill, like for me watching it, like I was at times like, wow, like this is an important issue that I need to incorporate into my feminism, like the disposability of men. Like I think that was the biggest one for me, because I'm like, you're right, like
honestly,
men are not seen as human.
I never really thought about it like that before.
Right, exactly. Like the military, like jobs, like all of that, it was kind of blowing my mind. But at the same time, watching the documentary, it was clear that this was Cassie J, the interviewer, documentarian's first time discovering intersectionality. And so I was kind of like, okay, you're not a feminist anymore, but you could have just became an intersectional feminist.
That was the worst part about the whole thing.
And you know what's funny? I had actually DM'd her, guys. I reached out to her because I wanted her to comment on stuff, because originally this episode was taking a different perspective. I didn't know where I was going before I did this, but I asked her, and you know, you never know, she could DM me in the future, but I do want to talk to her because I feel like I want to understand why she got there.
I do too. And the last thing I'll say is like, now being in like 2024, 2025, it's like men are disposable too. Like it's like their money, and like we just need them for like sex and money, and that's it. So it's like
protect, provide, that's it. All right, bitches. So we were about to get into Me Too, but our screen recordings are fucking failing. We're tired. It is past 1 a.m. where I live in Atlanta right now. We're tired. We're realizing that this 69-page outline cannot be fit into the hour and a half, 2 hours that we thought it would. So we need to do a part 2. As we said at the beginning, we were going to originally just do this whole timeline in one episode and a breakdown in part 2. Now we have decided to move the rest of the timeline from Me Too to present day to a part 2, and then we will have a part 3 with a breakdown. So this is a whole mini series of this episode, because you know when Fiji is researching, I was manic when I planned this episode, and bitch, I just did too much.
For 14 hours, like
literally, I was drinking my Vietnamese iced coffee, zoned in, hyper focused for 14 hours, didn't look up, and I am realizing that we both are right now.
And
so we're going to end it here.
Yep, we're going to end it here. We're going to pick it up exactly here next week for the Me Too movement in 2017. Obviously, this was kind of a different episode, but let us know what you guys thought. Like, did you learn anything? Like, did we miss anything? As we said, like, please comment below. Give this video a like so we have the motivation to keep going. Like, maybe this could be like its own playlist, honestly, like all the gender wars in one. But yes, like the video. We're so close to 800 subscribers, literally just 10 more people. Hopefully by the time this is out, we've hit it. But we're on that journey. So subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, keep the conversation going. And you can also always rate us on Amazon, Spotify, or written reviews on Apple. Follow us on Instagram at So Wet So Dry. The O's are zeros to participate in our polls, share stories, and just know what we're up to, like if you guys care. So
yes, we also do have listener support. It's $9.99, $4.99, or 99 cents a month. It is in the bottom of the description of every single episode, no matter what platform you are listening on, but it is through Spotify. And yeah, we love you guys so much, and we will catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Your feminism isn't intersectional enough if you're not including sex workers. Prostitution is the oldest profession, and sex workers today are benefiting from patriarchy. They have found a way in which we as women are over-sexualized for our bodies, and they have turned it into profit. A lot of women like Lily Phillips are also breaking down the fourth wall and letting you into the behind the scenes of what this job actually looks like. By her vlogging in between the content that she takes, she's showing you that this is work. I'm creating content. Just like any other singer, rapper, actor, entrepreneur, but we don't want to see it that way. So many people are saying 100 bodies is too much, even for a porn star. They're like, oh my God, she must have gone through so much trauma. She's gonna regret this later. So hard on her body. But for everybody that says it's so hard on her body, why are we treating the any different than any other body part? Hold up. Under capitalism, we are selling and working our bodies to death every single day. Construction workers, teachers that are on their feet all day, waitresses, bartenders, people in the military, masseuses, nurses, doctors, all of these people do very physical things, nail techs, hairstylists. I don't understand why it's okay for people to use their body for work and for capitalism in anything besides sex. But that's a misogynistic belief. Porn and sex work are female dominated, and it is work. But if your feminism does not extend to standing up for them as well, then I think you're missing the point. But anyway, me and my best friend talk about it more in our podcast called So Much to Try. The link is in my bio.